On this sunny day, the waiting time outside the Dongan High School building dragged on very slowly. Two men in brown suits with badges were talking, and the shorter one with glasses told his smiling companion that he had finished quickly and then just sat there and got bored. Some noise attracted the attention of both of them. Bulky armored vehicles drove down the street, and people were sitting in their backs. They were young guys in expensive suits. The young girls watching them loudly admired these young men. "These aren't even hunters," one of the men in brown said to another, "but simply students from a specialized school." The second guy dismissively suggested that his interlocutor pay attention to the logo that belonged to the School of Heroes. Many years ago, it all started suddenly, without any warning, and people on the street looked in horror at the crimson sky. Many winged dragons descended to Earth. The monsters were larger than a skyscraper, and they penetrated human cities, scattering sparks of flame around them. The people of the cities looked at the monsters but did not even try to run away. According to scientific facts that were discovered later, there was a world similar to Earth in outer space. But because of the disaster that happened there, that whole world fell apart. The flaming debris fell to Earth and began to merge with the environment all over the planet. The phenomenon was called the merger, and the laws of nature of another world began to operate on Earth, and monsters appeared. The Earth changed, and monsters took control of approximately 17% of the Earth's surface. These areas were called the dungeons. A young man in a military uniform and a bulletproof vest watched as monsters killed people. The creature, only partly resembling a man but much larger, grabbed its victim by the head. This monster was called the Horned Horror. The stronger the creature was, the more horns it had. The monster looked at the city engulfed in flames. A guy in a military uniform hid from him behind a ledge of the wall. With a furious growl, the monster rushed towards him, sensing his presence. The guy took a machine gun and started shooting at the approaching enemy. The monster ran very fast, and its eyes glowed brightly. He hit the man, and the blow was so strong that blood came out of the victim's mouth. The next blow threw him back several steps. The man crashed into the wall and made a hole in it. The monster stood above him, and even his outstanding human abilities were not enough to resist these unknown guests. The monster crouched over its victim and let out a growl. But fortunately, the invasion from another world brought with it not only cataclysms, and the just helpless guy suddenly rose up and attacked the enemy with unexpected power. The innate limitations of humans and the limitations of potential inherent in the nature of the Earth no longer worked. The glow enveloped the man's figure, and now he had enough strength to hold the Horned Horror's fist with his own bare hand. The monster did not give up, and the fight continued. People changed and began to possess abilities that were previously inaccessible to them, as if they had thrown off the chains that had always bound them. A man could grab a monster several times larger than himself and throw it to the ground. The guy in military uniform used the ability that suddenly appeared in him to destroy the enemy. It was a victory, but the winner did not immediately realize it, looking at the defeated enemy. He looked in amazement at his own hands, enveloped in the glow of new strength. All Earthlings developed abilities, but each had their own skill, and those who stood out from the rest through training learned to use their full potential. A black sun rose over the ruined cities, and armies of monsters advanced on human territory. Now the people had something to oppose them with. They formed elite troops. Those who returned the dungeon zone to the people became known as hunters. Hunters fought monsters, dedicating their entire lives to this. The age of dungeons and hunters has arrived on Earth. People began to defeat the enemy, which had previously seemed too powerful. The whole world shook from their achievements and power. Before the end of a single generation, schools were founded in which future hunters were educated. The best school for teenagers, as well as an educational institution that had been producing successful hunters for 25 years, was Hero High School. Young people all over the world were eager to get into it. On a clear, sunny day, people in the city that had not been destroyed were discussing the students of the School of Heroes taking the exam in the dungeon. One man asked another what would happen if they died inside, but the second replied that they must be confident in their abilities if they were able to get in. Joyful exclamations again attracted the attention of the interlocutors. The group of girls continued to noisily admire, having noticed some particularly attractive young man. It was a fair-haired half-elf boy. The girls said it was on a completely different level. One of the guys watching them asked who it was, and the other replied that the half-elf was often shown on TV. His name was Choi Diav. His father was a famous hunter, his mother was an elf, and he himself was predicted to have a career as a hunter in the top 5 within 5 years of graduating from high school. Choi Dia was now 17 years old and a first-year student at the Hero School, having made 14 trips to the dungeons. The observer was surprised that the girls admired this young man so much, because he was not some kind of superstar. His interlocutor called him Cha Ryung and remembered that he had a part-time job today, adding that Lee Yun-jin invited her friends to karaoke. Cha Ryung looked at his phone screen and wished his friends to have fun without him. The friends suggested that Cha Ryung might be able to skip his errands today because the exams were over, but the other person hit him, causing him to fall. Cha Ryung said that they would see each other next week and headed away. One of the remaining boys told the one lying on the ground to think first and then speak. Everyone knew that Cha Ryung had a special situation. He was taking care of a seriously ill loved one. At this time, Cha Ryung was walking down the street, reading the notifications on his phone. One said that he had not paid his hospital bills for 2 months. The second said that an order had come in and he needed to come to work. Choi Diav, with his eyes closed in satisfaction, waved his hand to the girls greeting him. His attention was drawn to the silhouette of Cha Ryung walking away down the street. Choi Diav's friend asked what happened, what had upset him about that guy. But Choi Diav replied that he had just imagined something. Cha Ryung thought that he really didn't want to work today. He went down into the underground passage and crawled under the striped tape prohibiting passage. "Ah, it's you," Cha Ryung heard. "Say hello to our customer." 3 people were waiting for Cha Ryung in the passageway, broker Im Jae-hwan, and 2 strangers, one short and bald, the other huge and heavily muscled. Cha Ryung started to say words of greeting, but was rudely interrupted. The bald man furiously accused Im Jae-hwan of making fun of him. He needed the most capable person. But the broker objected that he invited the most capable one. The bald man loomed over Im Jae-hwan menacingly and called him a beast, and also said that he did not come here to do charity work. He ordered to remove Cha Ryung from here and bring a normal man. Cha Ryung watched the squabble. The bald man promised that if his demands were not met, he would make both of his interlocutors disabled right there. Cha Ryung intervened and asked the second stranger, the broad-shouldered one, if he was the hunter. But he quickly guessed that the broad-shouldered one used to be a hunter, but now he is no longer one, and works for the bald one, whom Cha Ryung called unfinished. The bald man stopped making a fuss and asked what the freak said. Broad-shouldered replied that he saw no point in talking. He just needed to break this impudent man's legs and arms, and he himself would understand where he was wrong. Im Jae-hwan continued to smoke silently, while the strangers tried to force Cha Ryung to apologize by threatening him with violence and calling him names. Cha Ryung responded that he didn't know how to do it. He rolled up the sleeves of his jacket, and a bluish glow formed around his figure. What is dungeon smuggling in simple terms? The hunter's job is to clear the dungeons of any dangerous creatures that may be encountered there. If they successfully destroy the monsters, they receive a large reward. But before these treasures are brought out into the open, they need to be tested. After all, among them there are treasures that possess enormous power. If they are left outside without proper permission, they could be used for dangerous purposes. Therefore, such treasures must be checked and registered by the Hunters Association. They are also subject to a corresponding tax. There are those who break this rule. They make an agreement with the hunters who do not want to pay high taxes. These criminals are secretly carrying out the treasures of the dungeons. If they are not caught, chaos may reign in society. The advertisement calling for such offenders to be reported to the Hunters Association was known to everyone in the world. Im Jae-hwan took out another cigarette from the pack. The bald man looked questioningly at the broker. He asked if he really would not interfere. Cha Ryung and his opponent, the tall, broad-shouldered Lee Pil-gyu, stood opposite each other, ready to begin the fight. Im Jae-hwan asked the bald man if he was scared now, but the customer objected that he was not the one who should be scared, since his fighter was very irritable. Lee Pil-gyu quit the hunters not because of an injury back in the day, but because of a beating from a colleague, and now his bosses have had to clean up corpses more than once. Cha Ryung said that beating up a coworker is serious, and Lee Pil-gyu is the real criminal, but it's not Cha Ryung's place to say such things about others. Lee Pil-gyu replied that he killed a pathetic person who was in his way. It was like getting rid of trash. Cha Ryung looked at his opponent thoughtfully. Then the guy suddenly smiled and said that now he would know what it meant to get rid of trash. Cha Ryung suggested that Lee Pil-gyu had committed the crime on purpose to get his license revoked, and Im Jae-hwan chuckled, thinking that the guy was truly crazy. Lee Pil-gyu's fist almost hit Cha Ryung's face as he continued to speak mockingly. It was a blow of incredible force, capable of taking off a head in one go. He didn't even touch Cha Ryung, and he said that his opponent didn't know how to attack. Lee Pil-gyu instantly became furious, but Cha Ryung remained calm. He said he would also give a light blow. Cha Ryung swung his arm and kicked Lee Pil-gyu in the base of the neck. Cha Ryung's face was filled with a mocking expression, while his opponent rolled his eyes in pain. The bald customer looked at what was happening in shock, but Jae-hwan said that he warned that he would bring the most capable guy. Charyung retreated from the enemy, a glow of energy emanating from him. He said that looking at Lee Pil-gyu's appearance, he thought he would be tougher. Lee Pil-gyu didn't understand what had happened because there was a skinny youth standing in front of him. But the reflexes of this boy and the force of the blow that Pil-gyu missed impressed the former hunter. They pointed out that Lee Pil-gyu was facing a real professional. Jae-hwan told the customer that he had finally begun to understand something, and that Charyung was not someone who could be easily defeated in a fight. "He fights well," said the bald man, "but there was a time when Pil-gyu could do a lot." Jae-hwan replied that he had a rough idea of what it was like before. In the past, Lee Pil-gyu was one of those people called tanks. In response to the customer's surprised look, Jae-hwan explained that he had good intuition. Lee Pil-gyu told his opponent that he might know a few tricks, but that didn't stop him from being just some smuggler. Energy flowed from Lee Pil-gyu's body, reminiscent of electricity. After the merger, humans acquired skills that went beyond their boundaries. People have different shapes and abilities, so these skills also differ. The same applies to hunters. They are trained according to their talent, and each one plays his own role. Charyung looked at Lee Pil-gyu in amazement. Among the hunters there were so-called tanks, a specialization that protects team members from the dangers of the dungeon. They walked ahead, facing the monsters firsthand. Their bodies were so trained that bullets were not a threat to them. The best of the tanks were not afraid even of hits from rockets of any power. Charyung watched his opponent's transformation and recognized him as Tank. He entered the battle and attacked Lee Pil-gyu. The customer was shocked and speechless as he watched this fight. He tripped and almost fell, but Jae-hwan caught him. Jae-hwan muttered that what was happening was just hooliganism. Charyung had trashed his work area. Lee Pil-gyu delivered devastating blows, but Charyung deftly dodged them. Lee Pil-gyu's fist broke through the wall and he asked Charyung what was wrong, why he didn't show his abilities anymore. Charyung replied that he was simply not a fool and had no plans to jump into the trap set for him. Jae-hwan patted the customer on the shoulder and noted the good level of his fighter. Lee Pil-gyu's physical strength after transformation was comparable to an average truck. If it hit him, all his bones could be crushed. Jae-hwan shouted at Charyung to finish faster. He said that if Lee Pil-gyu smashed anything else, he would cut Charyung's salary. Lee Pil-gyu approached Charyung and said that Jae-hwan still didn't understand what was going on. Lee Pil-gyu told Charyung to admit it himself that he wasn't qualified to fight against a professional, but the guy just chuckled that it wouldn't be bad. Charyung picked up a long beam. He looked at the simple weapon and said he thought it would be enough. Due to their superior durability and agility, tanks were considered simply invincible. Charyung still didn't try to attack the enemy. He thought that everyone has their own weaknesses and enemies. Jae-hwan noted with certainty that this was the end. Two fighters radiating energy clashed in close combat. Charyung thought about those who were able to concentrate enormous destructive power into one point. The fighters dealt blow after blow to each other. Sparks flew for many steps around. After one successful hit, Lee Pil-gyu had blood pouring out of his mouth. The huge tank fell to the floor, and a very small guy stood above it unharmed. Lee Pil-gyu said, without getting up, that he wanted to know where Charyung learned this spinning technique. Charyung replied that he thought he had no idea about any techniques, but he understood that Lee Pil-gyu could actually see her before. Charyung thought about another warrior of great power who possessed this technique. This hunter was his father. When Charyung was just a child, his father was the best hunter. Little Charyung carefully crept out of the house to watch his father practice in the yard. This man's name was Yu Seong. When he was young, he was a soldier who fought monsters. Yu Seong was one of the first to discover that he had unusual abilities that allowed him to win these battles. He was the one who led the people into this difficult battle. This man was from the first generation of heroes who became the first hunters. Yu Seong lived through the worst of times, but for those born much later, he became a legend who will forever be etched into history. After all, for the hunters themselves, those times were hell. He was the only one who survived from Yu Seong's squad. There wasn't enough information yet about what the dungeons were. Monsters that don't seem to be the most dangerous in the modern world were comparable to an unknown disaster for the hunters of that time. They didn't necessarily look like humans. Some resembled giant worms with toothy mouths. People often ran away when they saw such a monster. Those who overcame fear found ways to deal with it. They found weapons suitable for killing monsters. In the dungeons, special alloys were used that were resistant to corrosion. Yu Seong was one of those who stood in the way of the unknown enemy. It was a very hard life. It required special courage to go into a hopeless attack. The first generation of hunters risked their lives using trial and error. The group that found Yu Seong after the fight with the giant worm consisted of 3 people. They were amazed by what they saw. The fighter sat next to the defeated monster, all alone. Those of the first generation who survived gained experience and achievements. They did it for the sake of future generations. In the end, they became heroes, like Dragon Slayer Yu Seong. This nickname was given to the one who was the first among people to kill a dragon. He was the best among the hunters in Asia in this world. Charyung respected and envied his father more than anyone else. He firmly believed that his father was invincible until he spied on him training. He saw the mighty warrior spitting out blood after coughing. Little Charyung ran to his father, afraid for him. Yu Seong raised his hand in warning, stopping his son. The cause of the Dragon Slayer's illness turned out to be poison. Charyung looked at his father and cried bitterly. While hunting in the dungeons, Yu Seong was poisoned and there was no way to cure him. The illness left him bedridden. He tried to overcome this difficulty. His physical condition had reached its limit after all these years. He was very exhausted. In this situation, even his colleagues, for whom Yu Seong had risked his life more than once, betrayed him. They took advantage of his illness and appropriated his achievements and property. Yu Seong's physical and mental suffering continued for several years. As time passed, the world began to forget the name of Dragon Slayer Yu Seong. It was no longer possible to see that image of a hero in him. He lost everything he had, suffered from an unknown disease, and was now just a former hunter, forgotten by everyone. Charyung stood over his fallen opponent. He never forgot who his father once was. Charyung didn't explain this to Lee Pil-gyu. He threw away the beam with which he had struck him and walked away. Im Jae-hwan looked at the customer and said that it was not difficult. The customer couldn't believe his own eyes that Lee Pil-gyu had lost to some very young guy. Im Jae-hwan said that Lee Pil-gyu was not a good hunter. Charyung turned around and said that just by seeing Lee Pil-gyu bragging about beating up his own colleague, you could immediately tell his low level. The guy explained that there are only 2 cases of good hunters resigning. Charyung said that former hunters are those who are no longer able to continue their work due to injuries or who die during a raid. Charyung pointed out that if the customer pays Lee Pil-gyu more than the lowest rate, then it is better to fire him. But if he is only chasing weight, then anyone can do that. Im Jae-hwan put his arm around the customer's shoulders and said that Charyung was exaggerating and that the dear customer should be understanding. Then the broker smiled and added that the fee for the service would be twice as high. The customer got angry and asked what kind of nonsense this was. Im Jae-hwan explained that the client was the one who started bullying him first. The broker said that nothing is done for free. The customer glanced sideways at Im Jae-hwan and replied that he understood and that's what they would do. Im Jae-hwan called out to Charyung. The broker asked him if he had heard of the celestial wasp, and Charyung choked on the water he was drinking. Charyung asked if he would have to fight her and remarked that it was too much. The sky wasp was the name of a monster that was known as the most dangerous monster not only on the Korean peninsula but throughout the world. The old Uido area, where the sky wasp nest is located, has become the most difficult area in Korea. Im Jae-hwan said that it was hard to deal with even one individual, so there were entire troops there, so there was no chance for the smuggler. The customer told Im Jae-hwan that there was a major raid yesterday that was not covered by the media. The state provided support to the military, and a team of 7 white-rank hunters was assembled. Charyung was surprised by this news. 7 hunters was a lot. Im Jae-hwan replied that all the Korean stars had gathered, and usually, as soon as a couple shows up, all the newspapers shout about it. Their goal was to destroy the sky wasps, but they failed. But they managed to hunt the queen. One of those 7 hunters took the royal jelly of the sky wasps, persuaded one of his men in the special forces, and secretly smuggled the item out. It was the first time Charyung had heard of royal jelly, and Im Jae-hwan explained that it was a nutrient that the wasps fed to the new queen. Charyung winced. He couldn't believe that a white-ranked hunter would decide to engage in smuggling for some nutrient. Im Jae-hwan said that the royal jelly of the sky wasps has appeared several times already, and the person who ate it was able to come back to life from an incurable state. Charyung was very impressed by the story he heard. All the nooks and crannies leading to the dungeons must be under strict control. This is the official position of the Hunters Association and the government. Im Jae-hwan claimed that in reality things were not like that at all. The broker stood in front of a large metal door. He touched that door and a glow of energy emanated from his hand. Warmly dressed, Charyung looked at the protective glasses in his hands. Im Jae-hwan said that he needs to be careful not to die, especially this time. Chaoyang remained thoughtful and did not react in any way. Im Jae-hwan noticed that the guy was thinking about something else and not answering. He asked if it was because of the royal jelly. He assumed that Chaoyang was haunted by the words about the potion that could revive the dead. Chaoyang turned away and replied that it didn't matter whether he cared or not. He still knew it was an exaggeration. He thought that even if this medicine, which has no equal, existed, it still would not be able to cure his father. Chaoyang knew that if there was any way, he would never lose hope. He swung open the heavy gate, and a blinding light burst through the resulting gap. Chaoyang found himself in a sunlit wasteland and peered into the distance. After the merger, various dungeons appeared all over the earth. There were several of the largest on the Korean peninsula. The first was where Jeju Island merged with the Hot Rock. Chaoyang adjusted his goggles, thinking about what lay ahead. The second large dungeon was where the Igara jungle merged with part of the Uido area of Seoul. It was a huge dungeon, in the center of which was the Yeouido district, as well as the Mapo, Yongsan, and Yongdepo districts. This dungeon had not been cleared yet. Many hunters said goodbye to life in it. One of the smuggler's men delivered the goods to the meeting place. Contact with him was lost when he arrived there. Most likely he was injured or in a dangerous situation. Im Jae-hwan believed that the man was injured by the heavenly wasps while he was running away. Chaoyang's task was to check the scene and bring the goods if there was any there. Im Jae-hwan told Chaoyang to stop thinking about weird things and focus on work. Chaoyang chuckled and asked if the broker thought he would run away with the trophy. Im Jae-hwan thoughtfully blew out a cigarette smoke from his mouth and said that Chaoyang was not a fool to do such a thing. Im Jae-hwan asked Chaoyang to be more careful than usual because royal jelly is a very expensive item, and not only humans are after it. Chaoyang used a strong rope to climb down the cliff. The guy landed in the middle of the forest between tall trees with dense crowns. The entire forest was filled with the scent of royal jelly. Chaoyang looked around and one detail caught his attention, causing him to frown. The monster's footprint he found was so huge that one could fall into it. The scent that hung in this forest would attract all sorts of monsters. Jin Se-ram from Hero High School was also here, and she was currently hiding behind the trunk of a tall tree. The girl was in the most terrible situation of her entire life. She thought that the second semester midterms would be easy, but something appeared in front of her. A monster that shouldn't have been in this place had appeared. And now Jin Se-ram was hiding from this giant. The girl pressed herself against the tree in horror, closing her eyes. Suddenly, she felt that something had changed in the forest. The exam was supposed to be very simple. It was necessary to collect as many coins as possible, which were hidden in different corners of the dungeon. It was a practical exam, and the difficulty level in the exam area was at its lowest, a hunting ground for beginners. Jin Se-ram looked at her palms. Taking advantage of her confusion, the giant monster came very close. The girl finally noticed the danger threatening her, and her eyes filled with horror. The monster was ready to attack. Jin Se-ram knew she had to escape, but it seemed impossible. And if there was a chance of success, it would be closer to a miracle. But despite this, Jin Se-ram decided to fight and took out her bow, which could fire 3 arrows at once. The monster she had to deal with was called the Titanium Ape. 3 arrows left the bowstring and quickly flew towards the target. They pierced the monster's palm, which it used to cover its face. Jin Se-ram thought that the monster's skin was taller than the armored cars. Her arrows did not cause any noticeable damage to it. The monster stood unharmed. No matter how much Jin Se-ram shot, its skin could not be penetrated. The girl did not give up and continued to fight. She flew into the air to hit the target from different sides. Jin Se-ram was completely focused on what she was doing. She managed to make arrows fly along a wide variety of trajectories. Thanks to this, the shots hit the monster's chest. None of the attacks had any effect on the monster, and he didn't even have to dodge or block the attacks. Looking at the monster's grinning face with its tongue hanging out, Jin Se-ram thought that she needed to get closer so that the monster would become a little less protected. Jin Se-ram was able to use magic on the tips of her arrows. She lit the arrows and prepared for another attack. The girl was a mage archer. She used a technique called fire explosion. The types of magic that could be imbued into arrows had no limits. For a complete victory, Jin Se-ram chose an explosion that soared above the treetops because the girl put maximum strength and power into it. She expected that such a blow would work on a monster with a 3-star danger level. Of course, this only applied to the situation when you hit the target exactly, and the girl was surprised to find that the titanium monkey had survived by climbing up the tree trunks. Jin Se-ram tried to understand what happened. The monster dodged or jumped up before the shot. The girl understood that she would not be able to repeat the attack a second time. Jin Se-ram froze in front of the monster, even though she needed to run. The monster rushed towards her first. He was very fast and almost caught up with her in a few steps. Jinsi Ram also ran, her eyes wide with horror. A bright flash hit the monster straight. The young man intervened in what was happening. It was Charyung. Jinsi Ram looked at him in amazement. Charyung looked at his victim, who had been hit in the chin and knocked to the ground. He thought the blow might not have been enough. Charyung reached into his pocket for a weapon and pulled out a pistol. He moved decisively into a new attack. Jinsi Ram couldn't believe that this man was charging at the monster, ready to fight him face to face. The monster was huge and raised its monstrous fist to strike. The stranger could die. Charyung shouted for the girl to close her eyes. Jinsi Ram watched what was happening in fear. Charyung's face twisted with tension. He practically flew up to the very face of the monster, which rose to its feet again. Charyung pointed his firearm at the monster. A blinding flash illuminated everything around. Jinsi Ram covered her eyes with her hands from the unbearable light. The titanium monkey was blinded and confused. Charyung thought he had just used his last charge. This tool was called the stun torch, a tool made from the scales of a glowing deep-sea fish. At one time, its disarm function won the love of many hunters, but the price was high. However, due to the inept use of its powerful properties, there began to be those who lost their sight. Charyung knew that using such weapons was currently considered illegal. Jinsi Ram carefully removed her hands from her face and opened her eyes. Charyung said that he had already helped, and from now on, everyone is responsible for themselves, and added that there were only a few seconds left. Charyung believed that no matter what happened inside the dungeon, he couldn't be seen by the hunters, so he didn't fight them or help them. Jae Hwan said that, to put it bluntly, they all looked like cockroaches. He asked Charyung if he knew that smugglers make good money. Charyung knew that if he climbed everywhere, he might get crushed one day. Charyung headed away. Jinsi Ram ran after him through the forest. It wasn't easy for the girl to catch up with the random savior. Soon she could only make out his figure as a small dot in the distance. Suddenly, the stranger disappeared, dissolving into the green forest gloom, although a moment ago he was ahead. He appeared suddenly, knocking Jinsi Ram to the ground and pinning her throat with his spiked pole, asking who she was. Jinsi Ram replied that she just wanted to thank him for saving her. Charyung didn't believe her and asked her if she thought he was an ignorant idiot. Jinsi Ram stated that this was not all she wanted to say. She knew that the man in front of her was a smuggler. Charyung was surprised to hear that the girl wanted to hire him for money. He looked at the girl and recognized the emblem of the School of Heroes on her clothes. The guy replied that he was not going to help her a third time. He let her go and was about to leave, throwing out at the end that he was not interested in knowing how crazy the offspring of the rich had gone at the School of Heroes. He looked over his shoulder and added that if the girl followed him, he would bury her. Jinsi Ram looked at his back, deep in thought. The reward for informing on a smuggler was 50 million won, and for a prisoner they gave about 450 million. Charyung was surprised to see that the girl did not leave him alone. The medallion he saw in front of him was called the Blood of Enkel. Jinsi Ram said that even if she captured 5 of his kind, that money would not be enough to buy such a thing. Jinsi Ram said that it was an advance payment, and if Charyung helped her pass the exam, she would pay the rest. Charyung replied that he thought she was just a rich girl, but now he's sure she's completely crazy. The girl asked if it was that important. She said that what was important was that now her interlocutor had a chance to completely change his life, and she showed him the medallion. Charyung stated that he knew this would happen. He told the girl that it was her own fault, even though he had no reason to kill her, and Jinsi Ram asked him what he was talking about. They stood opposite each other in a clearing in the forest, and Charyung suddenly looked up, saying that there were only a few seconds left, just like he had warned. The titanium ape jumped at them, and the monster's eyes were red. Jinsi Ram also turned to face the monster. The girl's eyes were wide open. Charyung threw his spear to her, and the girl caught it in surprise. The guy shouted that he didn't give her the gun so she could stand and watch. He reminded her how Jinsi Ram had already launched a fire blast at the monster. Now she needed to do the same. Charyung demanded that the girl put magic into the tip of the spear and throw it back. Jinsi Ram exclaimed that she had no more magic left. Charyung answered seriously that she had to solve this problem somehow. The titanium monkey was approaching, and it was not possible to hold out for long with bare hands. Jinsi Ram held the spear shaft and fiery energy swirled around her. The girl only had a quarter of her magic power left. With such low power, the titanium monkey could not be harmed. Jinsi Ram thought that while the smuggler was distracting the monster, she could escape from here alone. Charyung caught the magically charged spear that the girl threw to him. Jinsi Ram thought she must be going crazy. The spear in the smuggler's hand spun so fast that it looked like he was fighting with a wheel of fire. Charyung told the girl that this fire was less than a quarter of what he had seen before. He added that this would still be enough for him. With these words, Charyung rushed towards the titanium monkey. There are words that students at the School of Heroes hear all the time, that in a battle with a monster, it is not just destructive power that is important. The right moment for attack was of much greater importance. Also important was the feeling that allowed you to hit the target accurately. These were sensations and abilities that all hunters were supposed to have. The smuggler that Jinsei Ram met rushed forward furiously, joining the battle. He attacked successfully and the monster was engulfed in flames. The most successful of the blows hit the titanium monkey on the chin. Charyung's glasses were shattered into pieces by the intense battle. Jinsei Ram had her own complicated history, connected with the School of Heroes and not only with it. She was a cheerful child who ran around the yard with her friends. She saw her father's people coming for her. Jinsei Ram was waiting for the car that was sent for her. The girl said goodbye to her friends and said that she would see them tomorrow. Jinsei Ram knew that many people envied her. It was believed that this girl had everything she wanted. Jinsei Ram sat in the backseat of the car. She could really get her hands on almost anything that caught her eye. They drove past a tall, modern building. This was the main building of the fourth largest company in South Korea's business community, the Chinsen Group. The heir of this company married an elf, a representative of another world. Jinsei Ram was the child of this couple. Through the car window, she saw the hunters driving somewhere with weapons. She passionately wanted to become a huntress. It was her cherished dream. The fair-haired elf looked straight ahead and said outright that nothing would work. The girl was almost human. She had too little elven blood. Jinsei Ram, unable to catch her breath, fell to her knees on the sports field. The elf asked if the girl had not only not been stopped, but had even been encouraged to do this. Jin Sung-gyu, Jinsei Ram's father, said he did not encourage but supported the path his daughter chose. He noted that in order to become a hunter, it was not necessary to have the abilities of the elves, and his interlocutor did not object to this. The elf added that such abilities would not be superfluous for a person. Jinsei Ram was not much taller than the average teenager. The elf said that Jin Sung-gyu's daughter is not an ordinary person. Jin Sung-gyu wanted to understand what he meant. The elf meant that this girl would not give up easily. He smiled and said that in this way she was very similar to his sister. Humans could not compare to elves, even if they died in battle with a monster and then resurrected. If Jinsei Ram tries his best, he might be able to reach the average level. For an ordinary person, even this was recognition and almost praise. The elf believed that his niece had too much besides abilities from birth. Jinsei Ram was too rich, from too influential a family, the daughter of two famous parents. All this could instantly devalue all her efforts and make a laughingstock out of her. She was constantly under the spotlight of everyone's attention. This attitude could not be tolerated for long. Abilities didn't just fall out of the sky, but the random smuggler Jinsei Ram met in the forest did. The girl watched his fight with the monster in amazed delight. Charyung finished it and froze, clutching the spear in one hand. The monster lay on the ground, its neck ablaze with fire. Charyung slowly walked past the defeated enemy. Turning around, he noticed the lonely figure of Jinsei Ram at the edge of the clearing. "This can't be," the girl said, pointing at Charyung. "We are about the same age." Charyung thought he had broken the glasses that Im Jae-hwan had given him, saying that they were very expensive. Charyung was very surprised because such a thing could be bought for 5,000 won, but Im Jae-hwan did not agree. More than 4 types of magic were cast on the glasses. Now they were shattered into pieces. Charyung pressed his palm to his face and thought that he was just unlucky today. He didn't expect anyone to call out to him now, and looked at the girl through his fingers. Jinsei Ram asked if Charyung was a student at her school. He turned to her irritably and asked what kind of nonsense she was imagining. He extended his hand and demanded that the girl give him what she had promised. The girl gave him the medallion without further ado. Charyung looked at the artifact with suspicion and thought irritably about the rich kids. Jinsei Ram said that Charyung probably needed money, and she understood that not only at school but at any institution that trains future hunters, the tuition is not small. Charyung confidently replied that he doesn't go to such places. The girl was surprised, but Charyung assured her that she had approached the wrong person. The guy said that he doesn't study at the hunter's school and hasn't even been anywhere near it. Jinsei Ram asked who taught him this fighting technique back then. Charyung crossed his arms over his chest and replied that no one taught him. He claimed to be self-taught. A shocked Jinsei Ram couldn't believe such nonsense. She saw these movements, this sense of time. It seemed to her that they were making fun of her, and she began to scream in indignation. An ID card flew into the girl's face. Jinsei Ram saw the student ID card of Donggang High School. It was a simple school with a liberal arts focus. The girl said that this couldn't be. Chaoryong pointed his spear at the girl and declared that no matter what might not be there, she also had to show him either her student ID or another document. Jinsei Ram showed her Hero High School student ID card. She was a freshman and the same age as Chaoryong. The guy wasn't going to give the document back and hid it in his pocket. Jinsei Ram asked why he needed it. Chaoryong replied that if she wanted to give him a job, he needed to take everything he could so that she couldn't change her mind. Besides, Chaoryong added, nothing was over yet, and ordered the girl to come closer. Jinsei Ram walked over with a look of surprise and confusion, and the smuggler put his hand on her shoulder, pulling her towards him. Chaoryong picked up his phone and was about to take a photo of them together so that, instead of a contract, he would have proof of their accomplice. He reminded the girl that accomplices of smugglers receive exactly the same punishment. At that moment, Jinsei Ram realized one thing. It is entirely possible that she has gotten involved with a man who is much more dangerous than she thought. However, it was too late to change anything, and the photo of the two smuggler friends against the backdrop of the destroyed monster had already taken its place in this stranger's phone. After this, Chaoryong suggested counting, and first asked the girl to tell him what exactly he should do. Jinsei Ram explained that they needed to collect coins for the Hero School quest. In 6 hours, it was necessary to collect coins that were hidden in different corners of the examination field. It was also necessary to find an information cube with a drawing of coins, with the help of which Jinsei Ram had to confirm her identity. Jinsei Ram showed her future companion one coin she had found and said that she only needed to find one more for her to pass the exam. According to her, the coin did not need to be looked for too far, and Chaoryong specified where exactly. This place was located where the Eugene Mall used to be. This information made an impression on Chaoryong, even causing him to look up from his phone. That's how it all happened, he said, and Jinsei Ram asked him what he meant. Chaoryong was sure that she had not stumbled upon the titanium monkey by accident. The guy himself was looking for something, and it was inside that shopping mall. He briefly explained to her the essence of his mission, and Jinsei Ram was horrified when she imagined the heavenly wasp. But Chaoryong reassured her that he was not looking for the wasp itself, but something like its honey. He said that this thing has a very strong scent that attracts monsters, and the titanium monkey appeared because it also followed the smell. Chaoryong asked if the girl should go there in person and if the coins were really only there, and Jinsei Ram thought deeply. The girl admitted that there were simply no more of them left in other places because they had been collected by other teams. Chaoryong understood what was going on. He had been interested from the very beginning in why this girl was walking around all alone. For him, the way things turned out was for the best. Chaoryong suggested that he take out the coin and leave safely. That was his job. Jinsei Ram named the price she was willing to pay to complete the task. The amount she named surprised Chaoryong, but the girl said that it was all the cash she could use right now. She looked at her phone screen and added that if that wasn't enough, she needed a little more time to get a larger sum. Chaoryong said that if there was a reason for extra work, then she would pay for the extra expenses. He asked Jinsei Ram if she still had magical powers. Chaoryong quickly disappeared into the forest. The girl thought he was incredibly fast. She had to work hard to keep up with him. Chaoryong thought as he ran that he was shocked by the amount offered and now regretted that he had not thought to ask for more. Jinsei Ram asked permission to ask her companion something. The girl wanted to know if this man had really never studied with anyone. Chaoryong deftly jumped over the obstacles and replied that it wasn't like he learned from anyone. He learned from them when he was a child. Suddenly, they noticed two monsters with huge claws. These were level 2 cluster raptors. Chaoryong told his new companion to get ready. He really had no training in hunter techniques anywhere. All his skill was mostly gained by risking his life and fighting with his bare hands. There was one exception. As a child, he watched his father's technique, which taught him 3 simple techniques. This was the science that Chaoryong was going to use now, rushing at the monsters. The first technique was called Needle. He mobilized everything the hunter had, speed, body weight, strength, and directed it at the enemy's weakest point. Chaoryong struck the cluster raptor with his spear, causing blood to spurt out from the monster's mouth. It seemed easy, but in reality it was not so simple. The feelings and abilities were the result of experience. The monster fell at Chaoryong's feet, and even among the high-ranking hunters, few could say that they had mastered such a technique on their own. Chaoryong mastered this technique to perfection. Jinsei Ram also dealt with her opponent, literally piercing him with arrows. The girl felt that what was happening was strange. Cluster raptors typically gather in groups of at least 5. Charyung said that it wasn't just Jinsei Ram who suffered damage because of the royal jelly. They stood at the place where the ruined forest turned into the ruined city. And Charyung said that soon all sorts of creatures would gather here. Charyung suggested that they rest for a while before moving on. Jinsei Ram asked if Charyung received any private lessons as a child. Charyung replied that there were no lessons, he just watched the training a few times. It was even harder to believe that you could just watch and learn a few techniques. Charyung asked why the girl was looking at him with such a puzzled expression. Jinsei Ram honestly admitted that her new acquaintance irritated her, but Charyung didn't understand why. The girl silently threw him a small object, which he deftly caught. He had an ampule of endurance elixir in his palm, and Charyung asked why the girl gave it to him. Jinsei Ram told him to drink this medicine because he was most likely not in the best condition right now either. Charyung said with a smile that if the girl gave him the ampule because he irritated her, then she could speak worse about him. The boy hid the elixir in his pocket, and Jinsei Ram asked if he wasn't going to drink it. Charyung said that he could sell the ampule profitably later. Jinsei Ram asked if the guy didn't know how much she cost. Charyung explained that by selling it on the black market, he could get about 1,000,000 won. Jinsei Ram thought that this guy was very strange. Charyung said that since the girl had already taken her dose of the medicine, there was no need to linger. It was time to move on. He walked forward and glanced sideways at his companion, thinking that the children of rich parents were very strange. They reached the former shopping mall, and Charyung said that Jinsei Ram probably knows, but he wants to confirm some details again. Charyung reminded them that their goal was not hunting. They had to get what each of them needed safely and get out of here. He told me to keep my cool and follow his instructions, no matter what monster was inside. Charyung said that even if Jinsei Ram had studied a lot at her school, he knew the science of survival better, so the girl would have to trust him. Jinsei Ram looked down and agreed with the guy. She couldn't understand why she had such a strange feeling right now. She spent 6 months at the School of Heroes, during which she was unable to achieve recognition and settle in there. The girl was going to go into the danger zone with someone for the first time. The old building they were about to enter had long since cracked, and vines had covered the facade. It was a large shopping mall with many dark, half-empty floors. The partners froze on the threshold in extreme surprise. "What is this?" Jinsei Ram asked fearfully. Charyung replied that he didn't know because he was also seeing something like this for the first time. The room in front of them was covered in blood, and body parts of torn monsters lay everywhere. Charyung thought that man was a much braver creature than he thought himself to be. As long as he prepared himself, he could face any situation. When it comes to problems, they can arise when what is happening goes beyond what is expected. Jinsei Ram, looking at the corpses, thought that these were all the monsters that lived in this zone, and they were quite dangerous even for professional hunters. The girl thought with horror about what awaited them inside. Charyung told his companion not to relax. He said that there was something dangerous inside and asked if the girl didn't know about it. Charyung added that Jinsei Ram might be surprised because it's worse here than she imagined. But that doesn't change anything. Something moved in the depths of the room, attracting attention. Charyung grabbed the spear and pointed it at the approaching creature. This monster was called the Chopping Rib, and its danger level was quite high. Charyung was ready to enter this fight. An extremely long tongue burst out of the monster's grinning mouth and almost reached Charyung. The guy deftly dodged, blocking the attack with his spear. He watched in amazement as the creature's tongue twirled around the shaft. The monster snatched the weapon from Charyung's hands and pulled it towards him. Charyung and the monster looked at each other from opposite ends of the Great Hall. Charyung attacked the monster, again using the techniques he knew, and kicked the enemy's vulnerable spots. Jinsei Ram watched this fight from the sidelines. Having defeated the enemy, Charyung returned to his companion, and she admitted that at first she mistook the monster for one of the corpses, but it turned out to be so tenacious. Charyung objected that it wasn't a matter of survivability. Someone had deliberately left this monster alive to act as a warning to those who entered here. When the slashing rib is in danger, it lets out a terrible scream, alerting other monsters, and Jinsei Ram asked who could have left it here. "It's me," the unfamiliar voice answered, explaining that he couldn't continue to stay awake and wait for him. The young man stood on the top floor and, yawning, reported that there were more of these creatures than he thought, and as soon as he dealt with them, fatigue overcame him. Jinsei Ram asked if this man was a hunter. She noticed that the stranger said he was waiting. She asked if Charyung knew him. The stranger said that they were both too small to be smugglers. The school emblem on Jinsei Ram's clothes caught his attention. The stranger jumped down and asked if the girl was studying at the School of Heroes. Jinsei Ram replied that it was, and the stranger said that he was very sorry. Jin Si-ram was horrified to hear that she would have to die in such a place. Charyung asked why the girl was talking to him, since this man was not just an ordinary hunter, as she might have thought. He stated that it was a villain who was going to kill them and get the royal jelly. Charyung shouted that the stranger seemed to have no relation to his client and asked how he planned to deal with the consequences if he stole someone else's property. The stranger admitted that he didn't even know and would only worry about it if he was exposed. He said he was lucky. He accidentally overheard that his colleague was going to steal a precious thing. He originally planned to attack when Charyung was heading here, but he knew that things didn't always work out the way he wanted. Now he was sorry that he had not been able to complete the plan. He saw the monster run away in that direction, but he couldn't find it. There must be a shelter here where the treasure could be hidden. Charyung realized that the connection with the person in charge was not cut off because of the heavenly wasp's poison. This smiling, unfamiliar hunter was to blame for what happened. Charyung didn't have to fight him personally to understand one thing. The stranger took hold of the hilt of his sword. He said that Charyung's death was predetermined, but it could be done as painlessly as possible. In front of Charyung stood a real hunter, very different from the rabble he had met before. Charyung told Jin Si-ram to find her coin and get out of here as quickly as possible while he distracted the man. He explained that thanks to the stranger, the building was no longer dangerous, and Jin Si-ram asked what would happen to him then. Charyung noted that nothing would change if she stayed here. The stranger said that he heard everything and made the first lunge towards Charyung. Charyung shouted that Jin Si-ram should stop standing there and run away quickly. He added that he could only get his money if she stayed alive, and the girl started running. The stranger was surprised that she had actually left. He thought it wasn't the best choice. The chances of staying alive were higher as long as the boy and girl stuck together. The weapons crossed, creating sparks. Charyung said that the stranger was talking nonsense. To the hunter's surprise, they fought on equal terms. It even seemed to him that his opponent was calculating the trajectory of the sword. It was surprising to him. Charyung knocked Hunter down. A bright flash blinded everyone present. Charyung froze in a fighting stance, catching his breath. To his amazement, he heard a voice saying that he was a little surprised. The voice came from the dark figure. He said that he didn't think that he would have to use equipment as well, because he didn't take Charyung seriously due to his age. Now the hunter saw that his opponent was of a higher level than a professional, and he would have to work hard to remove that girl from the school of heroes as well. A gold-rank hunter emerged from the darkness. Fully armored and looking like a monster himself, his name was Yang Do-gyun. Jae-hwan was making himself instant noodles in his passageway under the displeased gaze of a bald customer. He offered to brew a glass for the client, but he angrily refused. Jae-hwan noted that it was better to sit down because the fighter lying on the floor would not wake up anytime soon. The customer said that this big guy had pumped up his muscles for nothing, and he had paid him so much. The fighter claimed that he himself was a hunter and boasted a lot about his strength. Jae-hwan said that he lost not because he was stupid, but because he deserved to lose. He thought it was a big mistake. Hunters shouldn't fight with people. This fighter was also wrong. He was trained for hunting and reconnaissance, not for fighting other hunters. He might have been able to deal with the monster, but it was no surprise that he was defeated by the smuggler. The customer said that he heard that the hunters were fighting among themselves. Jae-hwan agreed that such cases do happen. The higher their level, the further things can go. Even comrades and colleagues who fight together, relying on each other, can stab each other in the back out of greed. The customer asked if they kill each other. Jae-hwan said that no one can stop them from doing this, because anything can happen inside the dungeon. For example, you can say that a comrade was killed by a monster, and no alibi is even required. The higher the hunter's level, the more they train in anticipation of fighting each other. But Lee Pil-gyu wasn't a hunter of that level. Jae-hwan said that bragging about beating up a co-worker sounds cute. If Pil-gyu was caught doing this, then the incident must have happened outside the dungeon. There must have been some minor squabble over equipment. When hunters go hunting, they take armor and weapons with them. Jae-hwan said that if he had at least this friend could fight. Charyung was preparing to fight the hunter in the dungeon, and the smuggler only had a spear against him. For hunters, it is their equipment that makes up half of their combat power. Charyung didn't miss his attack. He hit the enemy exactly where he should have, but it wasn't enough for the gold-rank hunter's armor. Yang Do-kyun said that there was no need to think so much about all sorts of nonsense and attacked. The hunter's sword crossed with Charyung's spear. It wasn't easy to withstand the force with which the hunter pressed. Yang Do-kyun stated that it was simply impolite to him and to his own life. Yang Do-kyun threw Charyung back with a well-aimed blow. The smuggler had no intention of giving up. He looked straight into the eyes of his opponent. The spear in his hands drew various figures. "What's wrong with you?" asked Yang Do-kyun. "Come on, show me again what you can do." The shadow jacket made from Yang Do-kyun's armor provided physical strength support through the user's blood, and also formed a cover to protect against blows. Yang Do-kyun used the berserker style. Charyung thought that it couldn't be that he didn't have any weak points. But if you respond to the hunter's attacks poorly, he will kill Charyung. Charyung was focused on what he was doing. He tried to dodge every blow from the hunter. Yang Do-kyun triumphantly drove his opponent into a corner. The hunter noted that Charyung had lasted quite a long time. Charyung asked if maybe today was a special day. He took off the jacket that was damaged by Yang Do-kyun's attack and said that it was his favorite piece of clothing. Charyung noticed that there was nothing special about his opponent. He admitted that he was scared at first because of the hunter's aura, but it's worth considering that Charyung himself was an ordinary schoolboy who came with nothing. He looked at Yang Do-kyun and said that he only relied on his equipment, and he himself would like to have such armor. Charyung knew very well that his opponent was in a hurry. After all, he needed to destroy Charyung and then catch up with Se-ram so that she would forever remain silent about what she saw. Charyung was stalling for time as best he could. Yang Do-kyun was in an increasingly urgent hurry. Charyung moved quickly. There was also a second unique technique. Charyung also mastered it in childhood, spying on his father. It was impossible to perform it with only Charyung's powers. He used the power of his opponent's attacks against him to deliver a powerful blow. He himself did not fully master this technique. It was called Zib and was truly destructive for the enemy. Charyung wiped the blood from his lips and said that he never even imagined that he would have to use this technique against a person. He didn't think that there would be a professional hunter who would attack him so thoughtlessly. Charyung suggested that the enemy surrender, because no matter what he did now, he would not win. Yang Do-kyun grabbed a specially shaped knife and didn't respond to Charyung with anything other than curses. The hunter plunged the knife into his own chest. Charyung looked at what was happening with bewilderment. Yang Do-kyun declared that he would definitely destroy him. The fifth floor of the shopping center was dark and empty. Jin-soo-ram looked ahead with a puzzled expression. In front of her was the Hero School ID cube she was looking for. Jin-soo-ram walked up to him and logged in. The girl found what she was looking for. Now she needed to go back. Jin-soo-ram thought sadly about everything that had happened. She remembered how Charyung told her to run away quickly, and she started running because he said he could only get his money if she stayed alive. Jin-soo-ram tried to think that nothing would change even if she went back there. She remembered the hunter's confident face, his professional sword. She convinced herself that Charyung wouldn't fight without an escape plan in mind. Jin-soo-ram stood alone in the middle of the corridor. It was many years ago. Somewhere far from the dungeons, one guy roughly grabbed another by the collar. The second one had blood on his face and looked beaten, and he said that he would not behave like that in front of the one he called Do-kyun anymore. Yang Do-kyun considered himself a genius. Since childhood, everything came easy to him, and he knew it. His fight with another young man took place on a sports field, and a lot of onlookers gathered around. Yang Do-kyun was very talented. Adults recognized this. His peers admired him. But there was one thing that he couldn't do for a very long time. He had heard that you could only get in there through connections, that they looked more at money than at ability, and it seemed to him that this was true. If it were a contest of skill and ability, he certainly wouldn't have lost. Yang Do-kyun passed the test of overcoming difficulties, breaking all records and taking first place. All the other students had difficulty passing this test. But Yang Do-kyun was special. He was the talk of the hallways. He was in first place with an insurmountable lead in points. He was on a completely different level than everyone else. When he finally finished school, the director congratulated him. He shook his hand and predicted that Yang Do-kyun would become a first-class hunter, wishing him to never become arrogant and move forward. Yang Do-kyun thought of this man as a failure who was sent out to teach school children. He was going to look down on this man from above, from where ordinary people could not reach. In the dungeons, he had to face something that made him afraid. He saw a man standing with a spear over a fallen monster and saying that he was told that there was an emergency here. He ran as fast as he could, and there was nothing like that here. Yang Do-kyun understood that this man had single-handedly destroyed the monster that had just killed his entire team. Yang Do-kyun looked at the man as he approached him. He was well aware of the look directed at him in return. It was then that he first realized something he had never even thought about before. The words of that old man from the school were not advice, but consolation. Yang Do-kyun was not the chosen one. He was just one of the ordinary people, perhaps just a little better than others. Now, many years later, Yang Do-kyun finds himself face-to-face with an unusual opponent. The hunter's armor was made from a living bloodsucker monster that Do-jun allowed to absorb the blood that flowed to his heart. It was payment for him killing Cha-ryung. Cha-ryung wasn't so sure that this would happen. It sounded like a rather dangerous stunt. Yang Do-kyun himself took on the form of a monster and attacked the enemy. Cha-ryung noticed that the speed of his movements was not that fast. The monster that the hunter had become was approaching. The whip-like hand of darkness began to strike, which was very difficult to dodge. Cha-ryung couldn't block all the attacks aimed at him. Blood was running down his face. Yang Do-kyun said that Cha-ryung managed to block some of the blows. He had an extraordinary reaction speed. Hunter did not understand why this man was smuggling. Cha-ryung was surprised to hear this sudden praise. Regarding the smuggling, he replied that it did not concern Yang Do-kyun. Yang Do-kyun replied that, no matter what, he was grateful. Now Yang Do-kyun had the opportunity to trample someone like Cha-ryung. Cha-ryung gathered all his remaining strength and rushed at the enemy. Yang Do-kyun exclaimed that Cha-ryung was a good boy and suggested that he show more enthusiasm. Cha-ryung thought that the enemy wouldn't be able to keep attacking him forever. If a monster feeds on the blood of its host, it will eventually reach its limit. Cha-ryung needed to try to spend blood, then use the needle technique. The monster loomed over him, growling that he knew everything himself. Cha-ryung had time to think that it was too late. A flame struck the monster, illuminating the entire hall with a flash. Cha-ryung turned around in surprise to see his unexpected assistant. On the second floor stood Jin Se-ram, holding a bow in her hands, an arrow having just been fired from the string. Cha-ryung smiled and said that Jin Se-ram was indeed very naughty. Yang Do-kyun, who had turned into a monster, also saw the girl. Cha-ryung said it was impressive and delivered another accurate blow. Having returned to his previous form, Yang Do-kyun collapsed to the floor unconscious, and Jin Se-ram asked if he was dead. The girl came closer and leaned over the hunter. But Cha-ryung stated that there was no need to worry too much about him, because people like him do not live long. Cha-ryung explained to the girl that this man would not bother them much anymore. Otherwise, he would have to say goodbye to his career and reputation. Cha-ryung said that it could be considered that Jin Se-ram had repaid his debt, and the girl asked again what debt he meant. The guy reminded her that he saved her life and it happened more than once. The first time was when he intervened in a situation where Se-ram was attacked by a monster. Cha-ryung said that the second time he saved Jin Se-ram's life was when she ran after him. The guy said that he was ready to forgive her twice, which made Jin Se-ram blush. The girl shouted at him, "Can't he just say thank you?" They walked through the destroyed parking lot of a former shopping center. A golden glow was pouring out from a crack in the floor. Cha-ryung and Jin Se-ram stood before descending into that shining sea. The boy and girl looked at their find and remained silent. Cha-ryung began to carefully descend the steps. Jin Se-ram followed him. Jin Se-ram smelled a special sweet smell. Cha-ryung suddenly stopped, staring at something ahead. A trail of blood led to a dead body sitting against the wall. It was a man in camouflage uniform and a bulletproof vest, holding a suitcase in his hands. Cha-ryung walked up to the dead man and looked at him carefully. For a moment, the boy bowed his head and closed his eyes. Cha-ryung noticed the girl standing behind him, holding her nose with her hands. He told her that he warned her that there was nothing good inside. The companions leaned towards the suitcase. Cha-ryung suggested checking its contents. The golden glow that filled the entire huge room came from the suitcase. Cha-ryung opened the lid, and both companions smelled a very pungent odor. The vessel, filled with radiance, emitted a distant and sweet aroma that made one forget all thoughts. "How can you not come to this smell?" asked Cha-ryung. There were some other packages lying next to the first vessel. Cha-ryung was curious if there was royal jelly inside too. Cha-ryung slammed the lid shut and said that they had better get out of here as soon as possible because there was no telling who else might show up here. The satellites climbed back up to the first floor of the shopping center. The hunter that Cha-ryung had defeated in the duel was no longer in the place where they had left him. Jin Se-ram heard the man shout that they would see him again. The hunter was already leaving the building and finally said that he remembered their faces. Yang Do-kyun promised that he would kill them by any means necessary and started running. Cha-ryung listened to his threats with an indifferent expression. They didn't bother him. With a wild expression on his face, Yang Do-kyun ran through the forest. After some time, the self-confident rage left him. The titanic ape blocked the hunter's path, opening its predatory mouth. The tired hunter was not prepared for this meeting. The monster received its prey and immediately began to eat. Cha-ryung and Jin Se-ram listened to the sounds coming from outside with frozen faces. The guy suggested going out through the back exit, and the girl did not object. The sun was setting behind the treetops, casting its last rays onto the territory of the dungeon. Cha-ryung, who was carrying a heavy suitcase, breathed tiredly. He thought that he had reached the safe zone. He asked Jin Se-ram about her exam time, and she replied that there was still enough time. Cha-ryung extended his hand to her and said it was nice to meet you. There was a lot going on, and Cha-ryung was glad that they both managed to finish their business safely. Jin Se-ram looked at the guy and said nothing. She extended her hand to him to shake. Having already taken a few steps back, Cha-ryun asked over his shoulder if Jin Se-ram remembered about confidentiality and the banking period. If she didn't want to meet again, she should not forget about it. Jin Se-ram tried to stop him. Cha-ryung turned around. He didn't expect the girl to ask him to meet again. He returned to the base where Im Jae-hwan was waiting for him. Back? The broker asked and added. It seems the smuggler had a hard time, Cha-ryung agreed. Now both of them needed to examine the contents of the suitcase. Im Jae-hwan opened the lock and looked inside the trophy. He picked up the lamp with royal jelly and said that if he could sell it, there would be a big fuss. The broker was curious to see how many buildings he could afford to buy with that money. Yu Cha-ryung sat tiredly and listened to the broker's praise and promises to transfer the money tomorrow. Im Jae-hwan turned around and looked at the overly thoughtful boy. He asked if he was okay, but Cha-ryung replied that everything was fine. Im Jae-hwan asked the boy if he was worried about the hunter who died in the fight with him. Cha-ryung replied that he didn't die because of fighting with him, and he didn't have to feel guilty because of him. Im Jae-hwan asked if something else had happened to him. Cha-ryung assured that nothing like that happened. He asked the broker if he could take back the part of the suitcase's contents that was not royal jelly. Im Jae-hwan reminded that smugglers can take anything that is not related to the order. The broker was curious about what kind of baby would eat the royal jelly. Cha-ryung was surprised that the interlocutor used the word baby. Royal jelly could bring even the dying back to life, but it had more attractive properties. It was said to be able to expand the abilities of whoever ate it. Few people knew this. The jelly was more effective if eaten in childhood, so such a thing would not be fed to someone who was beyond hope. Im Jae-hwan believed that it should be at least a student from the School of Heroes. Cha-ryung said goodbye to the broker and got ready to leave. Im Jae-hwan told him to say hello to his father, but Cha-ryung wasn't sure he could do it since Yu Sung's condition had gotten worse recently. Cha-ryung walked out into the city, where the sunset was blazing. The boy was thinking about Hero High School. Jin Se-ram told him goodbye and that they would see each other soon. Cha-ryung assumed that he was interested in the girl, but she said that she was not going to joke. Jin Se-ram explained that there will be exams in the winter for students from regular schools who want to transfer to Hero School. Every year, they recruited 1 or 2 students, and the girl was confident that Cha-ryung would be able to pass the test. Jin Se-ram extended her hand and told Cha-ryung to come study with them at the School of Heroes. No hunter can clear the dungeon alone, even if he has excellent qualities as a fighter. It is almost impossible for one person to cope with the endless waves of attacking monsters. That's why every hero needs a team. Each hunter uses his own unique skill. In this way, team members make up for each other's shortcomings and overcome obstacles. What they do is called dungeon clearing. At the School of Heroes, factions are formed every year, Jin Se-ram said, and Cha-ryung asked if it was necessary to choose one side and fight the other. The girl said that she wouldn't even talk about such childish jokes. There were 2 such groups in the Jin Se-ram course. They were led by 2 students who were among the top 3, both of whom were elves. Cha-ryung asked if the teams were only made up of those who were part of one of the factions, and if that was why Se-ram couldn't get into any of them. Jin Se-ram admitted that this was the case and the teachers didn't say anything about it at all. The search for a team depends on the student's abilities. This criterion puzzled Cha-ryung. Jin Se-ram admitted that she lacks abilities. The girl herself understood that she would not be able to become an excellent student. But she wasn't such a bad student that she couldn't get into any of the teams, because there was also a team of those who didn't fit into any of the groups. The leader of one of the groups, an elf, always disliked Jin Se-ram. Outwardly, she tried not to show it in any way. She simply plotted behind Jin Se-ram's back, ensuring that she would not be accepted anywhere. Cha-ryung asked if Jin Se-ram had stolen that girl's boyfriend, but Se-ram denied it. She explained that she was holding up now, coping on her own, without a team, but that she wouldn't be able to do that anymore in her 2nd and 3rd years. That's why she wanted to hire Cha-ryung. She was impressed by the guy's abilities. She wanted him to be next to her. And then, perhaps, she would be able to stand firm. The scattering of medicines and bandages on the table at home was typical for the day after a foray into the dungeons. Cha-ryung treated and sealed his wounds. He sat on the bed and remembered Jin Se-ram. The girl seemed funny to him. Jin Se-ram walked somewhere for a long time. Then the girl said out loud that this was the very place. This was the dungeon barrier, Gangnam, 12th branch. The girl looked straight ahead. Charyung then told her that he understood everything and wished her luck and then left. Jin Si-ram didn't think he would ever call her. "You came on time," a voice rang out, distracting Jin Si-ram from her thoughts. Standing in front of the girl was Kang Jung-guk, the homeroom teacher of Class 1-1 at Hero High School, and a close combat instructor. Jin Se-ram asked what was wrong since the exam wasn't over yet, but the teacher said that there was some problem. Kang Jung-guk said that monsters were found in some areas that shouldn't be there. It's good that no one was hurt, but a signal was received that in some places it was no longer possible to conduct the exam. The place where Jin Se-ram found the coin was exactly in such a dangerous area. Kang Jung-guk asked if Jin Se-ram had any problems while taking the exam. Jin Se-ram replied that there was nothing. She didn't see anything unusual. Kang Jung-guk said that he understood everything. The girl didn't know that there was another monster behind her, but Kang Jung-guk noticed it and told her to move away and stand behind him. Jin Se-ram turned around, her eyes widening in fear. This monster looked much stronger than the one the girl had already met. It was a mature Titan ape. Kang Jung-guk walked towards the monster, muttering that the titanium ape appearing here was strange. He was sure that such creatures did not exist in these parts. Jin Se-ram thought that the monster was attracted here by something. She remembered the suitcase in Charyun's hands and the smell. The monster came to him. Kang Jung-guk repeated that the girl should hide behind his back. The Titan ape roared, ready to attack. All the teachers at the school were former hunters, so Kang Jung-guk stood before the monster. Retired due to injuries, the teachers could no longer clear the dungeons, but their skills remained with them. The Titan monkey raised its huge fist towards Kang Jung-guk. The former hunter took out his weapon. The fiery whip rose up to meet the monster. She wrapped many coils around the monster's arm. When Kang Jung-guk was not yet 30 years old, he was a hunter and received the nickname of the fighter against tyranny. The monster collapsed to the ground. Kang Jung-guk looked at him. The monster was defeated. Kang Jung-guk said that in everyday life you have to restrain yourself. But Jin Se-ram was just lucky. After all, something terrible could have happened to her. A scarred hand rested on the girl's shoulder. Kang Jung-guk said it was good that she was alive. He invited Jin Se-guk to come with him from here. Kang Jung-guk didn't care about other people's opinions because he was a hero himself and trained future heroes. At the Hero High School's basic skills training camp, a different conversation was taking place. One person asked another what would happen to those who sent a request for help. The second answered that they would simply have to retake the test, and that they were just lucky here. The man in heavy armor said that in any case, those who went that way were weaklings. "There goes one of them," the man added, pointing to Jin Se-ram, who was coming out of the forest with the teacher. Kang Jung-guk told everyone to go to their places and wait. As soon as everyone else returns, you will need to check that everything is in place and change into your school uniform. Jin Se-ram continued to stand next to the forest. The blonde girl noticed her and said that she told everyone that Se-ram was okay. She said she didn't know how it was with others, but Jin Se-ram was quick to grasp the situation. The 3 students of the school were heading towards Jin Se-ram. The blonde elf girl said that she was relieved because she was very worried. Jin Se-ram replied that it was quite unexpected that this girl was worried about her. The elf laughed and noted that she even felt offended when people said such things about her. Jin Se-ram looked at her tiredly. 6 years ago, during a training session, she tried to create a fireball on her palm. Zeke Esserm, Se-ram's uncle, watched her attempts and declared that it was weak and that the flame power needed to be increased even more. He told his niece to concentrate and not be distracted by anything. Sweat poured down the girl's face. Zeke Esserm waved his hand and said that it was over. It was much better than last time. Jin Se-ram stood hunched over and listened to her uncle say that she had achieved poor results again. The girl herself understood that this was exactly how things were. She was 11 years old and these training sessions were difficult for her. Another girl in the same room was creating large rings of flame around herself. The girl was the same age as Jin Se-ram. Her name was Anisha Esserm. Zeke Esserm thought that Anisha didn't look like a half-elf at all, and it wasn't just her appearance that showed it. Her ability to control magic was greater than most pure-blooded elves. Zeke Esserm told Jin Se-ram that her cousin was a genius, and if Se-ram also followed the path of a hunter, they would be constantly compared to each other. Then he added that it was even good that these comparisons would take place. But Jin Se-ram needs to be careful. If she makes a mistake, Anisha might crush her. Years have passed since then, and now Anisha said that she just can't understand one thing. She asked why no one wanted to take Jin Se-ram into their team. Anisha said that Jin Se-ram has enough abilities. So Ram replied that if she was so curious, then Anisha could join the same team with her. Anisha replied that this was too much. She would of course like to, but they were both long-range fighters. If they were at least on the same level, it would make sense, but no one would put two people in the same position. Anisha said that it might be better for Se-ram, but it could be detrimental to the other team members. The elf advised Jin Se-ram not to worry too much because they might have to retake the exam. Jin Se-ram hovered over her interlocutor and asked what difference it made to her whether there would be a retake or not, since she had already successfully passed the test. Anisha replied that Se-ram was a good girl and probably tried hard. Then Anisha turned away from her cousin and told her not to overdo it. In the end, Se-ram will still get her father's company, Anisha said. The girls each went their separate ways. Jin Se-ram was angry about this situation. Anisha thought that her opponent was fighting with all her might. In the evening, Yu Cha-ryung came to Seoul Sunyu University Hospital. The guy went up to his father's room and, opening the door, froze on the threshold. There were two doctors in the room who asked if Cha-ryung was related to the patient, and the guy anxiously asked what happened. Doctors explained that Yu Sung had suffered a sudden seizure and was now lying unconscious, hooked up to a machine. The doctors looked at each other with alarm. This patient was a very rare case, one could even say the only one in the world. After inviting Cha-ryung into his office, the doctor explained to him that no one had ever survived dragon venom poisoning. Cha-ryung clarified that it is impossible to completely cure Yu Sung with the help of modern medical technology. There is only a way to suppress the disease with the help of painkillers. The doctor confirmed his guess and said that there was a problem with the composition of these painkillers. The milk that monsters feed their pets was currently the only cure for this poison. And we were talking about the sky tigers, creatures of the 5th level of danger. Cha-ryung knew that this was a very rare raw material. But the problem was not only the money to purchase it. There were rumors among the hunters about a new potion, even a small dose of which could increase muscle strength and resistance for a long time. The ingredient in this remedy was also the milk of the heavenly tiger. The doctor said that earlier it could be obtained for money, since it was not really used anywhere. But now the situation has changed. Entrepreneurs and hunters have been buying it up in large quantities. It can't be, Cha-ryung shouted irritably. Is it really impossible to get a small dose to save just one person? The doctor replied that that was exactly the problem. From the single dose that Yu Sun needed, it was possible to make several dozen injections of the potion. The doctor explained that if a large number of people needed this medicine, the state would establish some rules. But for the sake of one single patient in the whole world, all these people will not give up their profit. The hospital doctors, in turn, were going to try to do something, but they didn't have any special connections and they didn't particularly believe in success. Cha-ryung went outside and sat on a bench in the hospital park. He needed to think about the current situation. The words about special connections gave him one thought. Cha-ryung picked up the phone and dialed the number. Jin Se-ram was surprised to accept the call at such an hour. Cha-ryung asked if he called too late, but the girl replied that it was okay. Cha-ryung said that he might be willing to accept the proposal that Jin Se-ram made to him the last time they met. The girl asked if he had any conditions. There were conditions, but first everything had to be checked, although Jin Se-ram thought that everything would work out. Cha-ryung asked if she would be able to get what she needed or not, and the girl replied that she would be able to. Her father's company also produced this potion, especially since Cha-ryung didn't need that much. Cha-ryung was surprised, but he wasn't going to tell Jin Se-ram about his feelings. She asked if he agreed, and they agreed to meet on Sunday. Jin Se-ram said that it was time to prepare for the exams. Preparation never hurts, so Cha-ryung came to the Special Research Institute of Defense Industry of the Jinsung Group. The appearance of the building impressed the guy. He heard Jin Se-ram call out to him, noticing that he had arrived early. The girl was standing next to the car. She asked if Cha-ryung was feeling okay. He replied that he was so-so. The guy asked what they were going to do in this place. Jin Se-ram explained that they were going to measure his abilities. After the world began to change, people developed abilities that went beyond the laws of nature. Before the fusion, ordinary people had D-rank abilities, excluding magic. When the indicators increased by one level and reached C rank, people were already called geniuses. And indicators above rank B already allowed us to talk about human superpowers. Jin Se-ram said that in addition to magical power, at least 5 indicators must be no lower than level C, then you can become a hunter. The girl herself had indicators C and B, except for magic, which was at a lower level. If 3 of her indicators are at least B rank, Cha-ryung will be able to apply to hero school. The guy asked if he would have to go through some kind of medical examination. Jin Se-ram replied that this is done in childhood, and after adolescence the measurement becomes a little more difficult. Cha-ryung clarified how much more difficult it was. Before the test began, Cha Ryung had to wear a special suit with a helmet. He said he should have known when Jin Se-ram asked him how he felt. In front of Cha Ryung stood a tall mechanical fighter, the golem Giacron Pro. Cha Ryung said that if he had already come here, then he should fight properly, because he himself was curious. He would like to know what his actual numbers are. Taking his weapon and taking a stance, the guy was ready for battle. The Giacron Pro camera has detected the enemy. The mechanical fighter was about twice as tall as a human. Jin Se-ram stood in front of the screens that showed images from several cameras. The second girl who was next to Jin Se-ram said that the test subject was acting confidently. Usually everyone is scared when they see a golem for the first time. The girl was a golem summoner and former huntress. Her name was Jun Yo-min. She asked if Cha Ryung was going to transfer to hero school and assumed that he had prepared well. Jin Se-ram said that it is. Jun Yo-min announced the start of testing and launched the golem. The mechanical fighter came to life and began to move. Cha Ryung was focused on the upcoming test. Measuring ability indicators is usually done at 6 or 7 years of age, with special devices being worn for detailed measurements. The devices stimulate the body, pushing it to the limit in various areas. The more unique abilities and the more trained a person is, the more difficult it is to make measurements. After all, it is difficult to stimulate them to the limit. Jin Se-ram suspected that her new acquaintance had the characteristics of a professional. It would not be easy to reveal his extreme data. Although due to yesterday's incident, his physical strength should already be at its limit, Se-ram thought. Jung Yo-min asked if it was true that this acquaintance, Se-ram, went to a regular high school and that he failed the exam and was unable to enter a specialized high school. Jun Yo-min asked this out of curiosity. She didn't understand how he could fail the test with such abilities. Jun Yo-min said that even though she lowered the difficulty level, it was clear that Cha Ryung had received professional training. At first, the guy dodged several times, reading the golem's tactics. Then Cha Ryung waited for the right moment to deliver a precise blow. He was simply amazing. His performance was better than any professional. The test fight continued. Jin Se-ram asked what was happening with the dimension. Jun Yo-min replied that she found it difficult to answer. Cha Ryung hasn't reached his limit yet. Jun Yo-min has increased the difficulty level of the golem's program. Yo-min noted that she didn't think there was much point in increasing the degree. She believed that normal results would only come if she removed the safe mode and ran the golem at full power. Jung Yo-min reminded him, and Se-ram was indeed aware, that it was illegal to remove the safety mode for a normal person who was not a professional hunter. Jin Se-ram threw up her hands and asked how to check it then. After thinking about it, Jun Yo-min admitted that this was the first time she had encountered such a case, and there was only one way left. "I don't think you're being paid to puzzle over this," said someone who entered the room. The girls turned around at the sound of this voice. Zeke Esserm, Jin Se-ram's uncle, and the director of the Jinsen Group's R&D department appeared at the lab and noticed that the lab was being used without permission today. Jun Yo-min didn't expect the boss to come because he usually didn't work on Sunday. Zeke Esserm asked whether the girls understood that they would be punished for their actions. Jin Se-ram turned to her uncle, assuring him that Yo-min had acted on her request. Zeke Esserm clarified what she meant by that. He asked the girl if she thought that this excuse would help make amends for his subordinate's guilt. Zeke Esserm said that Jin Se-ram shouldn't deceive herself. This was her father's company, not her own. Jin Se-ram wasn't responsible for anything here. Jun Yo-min watched the conversation between her uncle and niece and thought that the rumors about the boss were true. Even though Zach Esserm was Se-ram's uncle, he had treated the girl very coldly since she was a child. In fact, she didn't do anything wrong. There's no one in the lab on weekends anyway. Other hunters in the Chinsen group also use this room for their own purposes. Zeke Esserm wanted to say something else, but a voice from the speakers interrupted his sentence. Cha Ryung from the training hall wanted to find out what the problem was. Zeke Esserm asked who this guy was. Maybe a classmate of his niece. The girls explained that it was just Jin Se-ram's friend. Jung Yo-min explained that Cha Ryung wanted to become a hunter, but he failed the exam last year and lost his measurement values. She reminded them that all this was not cheap, and they just wanted to help a person in a difficult situation. Zeke Esserm noticed the golem on the screen. "Okay," he said. The girls were amazed to hear that the boss was going to do everything himself. Jun Yo-min asked what he meant. Zeke Esserm said that measurements would not be possible anyway while the golem was in safe mode. He was going to come down and fight Cha Ryung himself. Cha Ryung asked if there was really a problem. This happens extremely rarely, but when it becomes difficult to measure the limits, competitions may be held between hunters. The scale above the entrance to the hall lit up. In the case of a competition, the opponent had to have skills that exceeded the abilities of the one measuring the indicators by several levels. Zeke Esserm entered the room and said that this was unexpected, but they could skip the presentation of the participants. He clarified that he didn't have much time. Charyung looked at him in surprise. He wanted to know who this elf in a white shirt was. Charyung had no idea who his opponent was. The guy felt danger when the stranger said that Charyung himself roughly understood what was going on. And now he himself would do everything possible to replace the golem. Charyung saw that this elf was much stronger than the hunter he had recently fought in the dungeon. The guy had never seen anyone like Zeke Esserm before, and he felt in advance that he wouldn't be able to defeat him. "Attack," Charyung heard. "You don't have to worry about my safety," Zeke Esserm added. Despite the fact that he wasn't wearing any protective gear, Charyung took up arms. Power enveloped his figure. Charyung attacked the motionless enemy. If the right moment to strike is not in sight, you must make it appear. Zeke Esserm was not only the director of the Research and Development Department of the Jinsen Group, Se-ram's uncle, he was also a white hunter ranked 7th in South Korea. If a hunter is in the top 100, he is called a ranker and is given a color that depends on his place in the ranking. White is the highest and rarest. It is given to the holders of the first 10 places. Those who took places from 11th to 30th were entitled to black. Places from 31st to 50th belonged to green. From 51st place to 75th were called blue rank, and the last 25 and 100 wore red. Charyung's strategy in fighting such an opponent was simple. He would strike with all his might, which could only be dodged. When the enemy dodged, Charyung used the moment of hesitation to attack. Zeke Esserm easily put up a magic shield against Charyung. Charyung didn't expect to encounter such a defensive move. The elf said that Charyung was much more inattentive than he thought. Zeke Esserm intercepted the spear aimed at him with his bare hand. He kicked his opponent without using the weapon he had taken from Charyung. Charyung felt the power of that blow. Zeke Esserm threw the guy away. Charyung fell down and grabbed the injured area with his hand, trying to catch his breath. Zeke Esserm said he couldn't figure out if this wasn't a real fight, if Charyung was going to take all the punches, or if he just really thought the move would work. The elf noticed that Charyung looked pathetic in both cases. He tossed the spear with the toe of his boot. Esserm said that Charyung didn't even lose consciousness, but had already dropped all his weapons. Charyung looked at him with a complicated expression. The elf threw the spear into his hands with force. He noted that for someone who makes such stupid mistakes, 2 times would be quite enough. Esserm stated that if Charyung ever did something so stupid again, he would send him home because it would be better for Charyung himself to give up his dream of becoming a hunter forever. Charyung noted that his opponent had some kind of inexplicable dislike for him personally. It didn't matter, so he went on the attack again. Esserm saw that the guy was approaching just as fast as last time. Most likely he was going to use the same technique. Charyung suddenly stopped. Esserm focused on what was happening. The space between the opponents was quite large. Keeping your distance was standard practice. But this distance was clearly not enough. It was just a warm-up. Charyung's hand tightly gripped the shaft of the spear. The tip of the spear sparkled with power. Zeke Esserm's face turned serious. Streams of power lashed between the opponents throughout the hall. Zeke Esserm said it was done well. The elf attacked Charyung. The girls watched what was happening on the screens, and Jeon Yo-min was surprised. She clearly saw a battle between 2 professionals. Yo-min asked excitedly if this guy really couldn't get into any college, and Jin Si-ram just laughed in response. Jeon Yo-min said that if we talk about shortcomings, Charyung's technique has them. Jin Si-ram asked in amazement what the shortcomings were. Ye-min glanced at her and said that she was talking about a rather devastating flaw. The girl claimed that in this area, Se-ram was much superior to her friend. Jin Se-ram could not believe that Charyung was weaker than her in any way. Charyung fought on equal terms with her uncle. What could this shortcoming of his be? The girl thought, watching the unusual duel. Zeke Esserm launched another punch. Charyung barely dodged it. Charyung looked at the hand that almost hit him. Jeon Yo-min let out an inarticulate cry of excitement. The leading role in the duel was intercepted. Charyung's face took on a furious expression. The fight continued, and Charyung was clearly losing. Zeke Esserm noted approvingly that this time his opponent did not let go of his weapon, and he added that this is how it should be. The elf's fist pierced Charyung's chest. This blow threw the guy back many steps. Jeon Yo-min said that the boss really wasn't joking, although of course he controlled his strength. Jin Se-ram just stared at the screen. Zeke Esserm said that he was not going to comment on Charyung's defeat since it was predetermined from the start. The elf said the process leading to this defeat looked pathetic. Zeke Esserm said that this guy had no basic skills and that was very surprising. John Yo Min said the same thing while watching the fight. Jin Si Ram asked what basic knowledge we were talking about. John Yo Min explained that her friend's fighting sense and skills were excellent, but the basics like attack and defense methods made it clear that this fighter had no prior training at all. Yo Min herself was disappointed. With such a level of ability, Charyung could have been much stronger if he had received the basic training. Jin Si Ram remembered that the boy had already told her that no one had ever taught him. Zik Eskrim reported that he had seen many people like Charyung. He was referring to the pathetic guys who had unique abilities but didn't put in the slightest effort to develop them. Jin Se Ram listened to this with great excitement. This was not what she was aiming for when she invited her new acquaintance here. Esserm said that now Charyung needs to pay for the measurement. He thought it would be better to admit his hopelessness. The elf believed that only lazy people rely only on their own abilities. Charyung removed and threw away the broken helmet and rose to his feet. He said that he didn't know why his interlocutor allowed himself such a tone and such words. He assumed that the elf didn't like guys like him. Zeke Esserm thought his final blow should have ended this battle. Charyung continued his speech. He didn't care about some kind of measurement payment. He wanted to fight again. Charyung believed that he still had something to show for his efforts. John Yo Min wondered out loud what was going on. "Look," said the girl. "The desire to go to the end is good, but the data has already been obtained. There is no longer any need to fight." Jin Se Ram turned to Yu Charyung, telling him that he was doing well and that the measurements were finished. Charyung heard that he could go back and wait for the results. Esserm said he didn't know what the guy was trying to achieve, but it was all useless. The result wouldn't change no matter how much they fought. The elf wondered if Charyung really needed recognition. It was necessary for him to tell him himself that his efforts were enough and that he had amazing willpower. Charyung stated that he didn't really need it. He straightened up and explained that he was just really angry that it was all ending, and he hadn't even thrown a punch properly. Yu Charyung really wasn't taught by anyone. He did everything on his own from the very beginning. But he had one reason to continue the fight, which seemed pointless. He had outstanding abilities since childhood. Thanks to this, he was able to fill the gaps in his education. He also had a lot of experience, having risked his life many times in the dungeons. He allowed his craft to develop. These achievements were like a miracle, but Charyung did not consider himself outstanding. He simply looked with pity at the hunters he had met so far. His opponent today was completely different. Zeke Esserm agreed to continue the fight. Now he was going to trample this guy before he even had time to get angry. Charyung saw that such an opponent was a monster capable of surpassing himself. Charyung could look at this elf with excitement. Besides his own father, this was the first time he had met a real hunter. He himself did not notice how youthful blood began to play within him. John Yo Min said that it was all too crazy and she didn't understand why her boss was acting like that. Jin Sai Ram noted that the fighting stance that Charyung was taking now was unlike any she had seen before. The way the weapon was gripped and the body's center of gravity were clearly not suited for swinging a spear. It was as if there was a completely different person standing in the training room. Charyung exhaled heavily before launching another attack. He moved decisively and quickly towards the enemy. It was a swift movement, filled with power. Zeke Esserm watched what was happening in silence. John Yo Min was shocked by what she saw. Charyung's movements were different from how he fought before. Esserm dodged the enemy's attacks with lightning speed. Jin Si Ram saw that compared to the first part of the test, there were simple and clumsy techniques now. Yo Min said that there was not the slightest hesitation in Yu Charyung's continuous movements. She didn't know who this guy was trained by, but he was trained properly. Yu Charyung put everything he had into this attack. He saw his father in front of him, young and strong. When he was training with weapons in the garden, little Charyung would pick up a broom and imitate Yu Sung's movements. Zeke Esserm continued to fight unarmed. Charyung took the blows from his hands on the shaft of his spear. As a child, he had to use a broom for training. Now he had weapons and power. Zeke Esserm's eyes lit up. One day, his father noticed how little Charyung was repeating his fighting movements. The fight continued, with the opponents using blinding power. Charyung imagined Yu Sung's face. He dodged Zeke Esserm's fist. He remembered how his father had reached out to him then. Little Charyung looked at him, very worried. He didn't know what his father would say or do. The adult Charyung fought calmly. The father then stroked the boy on the head. He looked at him for a long time. In the training hall of the research center, the opponents once again flew apart over a great distance. When the elf lands, there will be a delay. Now it was simply impossible to dodge attacks. Therefore, we will have to do as the enemy wants. This is a blow that Chaoryung will have to face head-on. The girls watched the fight, spellbound, at the screens. The time has come for the final blow. After it was dealt, Zeke Esserm said that he should have kept it up and Chaoryung could have won. If only I hadn't started using those clumsy pull techniques again. The elf asked if Chaoryung wanted to boost his self-esteem. Lying on the floor, Chaoryung replied that he didn't intend to. He simply reached his limit. All the movements he had ever learned ended there. In the end, Chaoryung was defeated and now lay beaten on the floor of the training hall. But still, he felt that he enjoyed the fight. Zeke Esserm had a bad reputation among the hunters due to his difficult personality. So worried about Chaoryung, Jin Sai-ram ran into the hall. Jin Sai-ram knew that no one dared to say anything against her uncle because of his excellent skills. Zeke Esserm extended his palm over his fallen opponent, power radiating from his hand. He used healing magic. Esserm told Jin Sai-ram not to worry about Chaoryung. The elf assured him that everything would be fine. He had cured him, and there would be no consequences. Zeke Esserm asked if his niece had said that the guy's name was Yu Chaoryung. Esserm said he never thought he would meet Yu Sung's son in such a situation. Zeke Esserm was a white-rank hunter, of which there were only 10 hunters of this level in the entire country, and was also the best healer in Korea. Esserm left the research center and heard that if he was late, he could at least send a message. The man in glasses who said this added that then he would leave the car and go get a drink, and they would also be late for the briefing again. He looked at the elf and asked if he knew that every time they were late, everyone else thought it was his fault. Esserm replied that he had some business to attend to that had taken longer than he had expected. His interlocutor asked if Esserm had fought with some boy, because it seemed that he had more than one opponent. Suddenly, the man in glasses' eyes widened in surprise. Zeke Esserm looked at him questioningly. The man in glasses asked if he really saw a scratch on the elf's cheek. Esserm asked sullenly what else it could look like. His interlocutor could not believe it, because if this boy was preparing to enter college, he must be only 16 years old. Esserm replied that he was 17 years old and wanted to transfer to the School of Heroes this winter. The man with glasses remembered that there was a rule allowing transfer, but when he himself studied there, in 3 years there was no one who could pass the exam. Then he noticed that the boy would definitely do it, because he was still a minor. But he had already managed to scratch the face of Zeke Esserm himself. Young people are simply scary these days, he added. Zeke Esserm said that even though the guy was not on the same level as him, there was no difference with his interlocutor. The man's name was Kang Gun-ho, and he was ranked 19th in South Korea and was also the leader of the Knicks, Korea's first cleanup squad. He stated that naturally, his own level was higher than the unknown applicant's expected performance. Kang Gun-ho was 21 years old. He had graduated from Hero High School 1 year and 7 months ago, and he had no doubt in his abilities. Zeke Esserm noted that this was the first time he saw his friend's car, so he probably bought a new one again. Kang Gun-ho replied that it was the same one he ordered last time. He no longer spends money like before, and then announced the purchase price, and it turned out to be quite impressive. At this time, Chaoryung was lying on the bed near the equipment rack. He just woke up and immediately sat up in his bed. All his wounds had completely disappeared, and he no longer felt any pain either. He heard Jin Si-ram's voice asking if he was awake. The girl stood on the threshold with 2 steaming mugs in her hands and asked what he was thinking. Did he really hope to win that fight? Chaoryung explained that it wasn't for the sake of winning, but that he got angry and flared up when Esserm started teasing him first. Se-ram didn't believe that her uncle could tease Chaoryung. The guy was surprised that this elf turned out to be her uncle. Jin Si-ram confirmed that Zeke Esserm was indeed her maternal uncle. Chaoryung thought about it. He muttered that he now understood what was going on. The girl was surprised to hear the opinion that she had a very good relationship with her uncle, judging by how Zeke Esserm valued her. The girl asked what Chaoryung was talking about, but he stated that everything was exactly as he said. To Esserm, it might look like some weirdo had come along and was trying to deceive his niece, and it was understandable that he would be worried. Jin Se-ram objected that her uncle was not like that. He was very strict. Chaoryung did not argue with her. Jeon Yo-min peeked through the door and asked how Chaoryung was feeling. The guy said he was fine and that nothing hurt. Yo-min said with a smile that even if something had hurt, it would probably have healed by now. She said that her boss was the best healer in Korea, which greatly surprised Chaoryung. The guy thought that the elf was such a strong fighter, but it turned out that this was not even his main specialization. Chaoryung smiled at this new information. Jeon Yo-min said that it was good that everything was fine. Chaoryung's indicators were also clear. She showed a sign on which most of the indicators were A or B rank, and only the magic power was D rank. Chaoryung asked if this was considered a good result. Jeon Yo-min laughed. She was curious if this man was really an applicant. Jinsi Ram thought his performance was excellent, and she wanted her new friend to know when to stop. The requirement to become a hunter was a B rank or higher. B meant superpowers, C was excellent, D was normal, but harmony was required in the stats. Even if the agility is at a high level, but it does not correspond to health, it does not give the desired result. If only muscles are developed, they alone will not be able to pull other abilities along with them. Jinsi Ram said that among ordinary people, there are those who can reach level C in one of the indicators, but everything changes when there are two or more of these indicators. Muscle strength, health, agility were the most important. People who had all of these indicators at C rank numbered 1 in 10,000. They were able to fight alone. Those who got 3 indicators at B rank numbered only 1 in 500,000. They could become top-class hunters. Charyung had 2 B ranks, 2 A ranks, and no matter how balanced it was still a crazy level. Among the first-year students of the cleaning faculty, he was on the same level as that monster. Jung Yo-min asked if Charyung wanted to know something funny. The girl said with a smile that her boss, who fought with Charyung, did not have a single A-rank indicator out of the 3. Charyung looked up from his tablet in surprise, and Jung Yo-min explained that the stats were innate abilities and did not reflect current skills. If a person has an A but does not train and grow, then there will be no difference with D, and other factors also matter. It was important whether the technique he was mastering suited the person. Moreover, the sensations and experience could not be measured using indicators. Jinsi Ram listened attentively to her friend. Looking at Se Ram, Jung Yo-min added that there are many hunters who are constantly making up for their gaps in performance through their efforts. Hearing this, Jin Se Ram blushed. Charyung put the tablet down and thanked him for such kind words. He said he wasn't too disappointed because he didn't understand all this. Charyung said that he has one friend, compared to whom he himself lacks a lot. John Yo-min looked at him with distrust. Since it was not often that one could meet such people, she assumed that this acquaintance of Charyung was very famous. Charyung confirmed that it was true. He was thinking about his father. Jin Sai Ram summed it up. The measurement was finished. Charyung was a good boy. Now they can meet next weekend. Yo-min was surprised that the girl was already leaving. After all, she hadn't been to the center for a long time. Didn't she really want to take a look at the production department? Jinsi Ram admitted that she didn't have any acquaintances there like Yo-min, and her uncle would hardly allow it. John Yo-min reported that he had just given permission. Jin Se Ram was shocked, but Jung Yo-min explained that the boss himself said so just before leaving. Zik Esserm told me to take Charyung to the production department when he woke up. The head of the department can be told that this is Esserm's guest. The elf told him to pick up a weapon for Charyung there, no matter how much it cost, and this decision left Jin Sai Ram in shock. It was every hunter's dream to have highly effective weapons and armor. For a hunter, it was not enough to simply have outstanding abilities. The poor quality of the weapons did not provide any support to their owner. The hunter's skills could grow and change over time. A good weapon was necessary to apply these skills. Charyung himself understood this. The guy asked if he really needed a weapon since he was going to enter the school. Jin Se Ram was surprised because she thought it was natural. Charyung was sure that the school should give out everything necessary. He asked the girl if this was not the case. Both interlocutors looked at him with amazement. Jin Se Ram asked if Charyung really wanted to transfer to hero school. The girl said that he would be right if it were a simple school for ordinary hunters. Each such school provides equipment that meets established standards so that there is no discrimination between students. Charyung asked if things were really different at the hero school. He didn't understand why the school that had the most money needed this. John Yo-min explained that the problem was not money, but that this school itself was different from all the other schools. There is a significant difference in skills and abilities, the girl said, and preparing good equipment is also an ability. Yo-min said that at the hero school, students prepare all their weapons and equipment themselves. Charyung clarified that regardless of skills, those born into a wealthy family are in the most advantageous position, and if wealth is considered another ability, he has nothing to say at all. John Yo-min looked down and noted that this was a point worth considering. She said that even without money, there is a way to buy a good weapon. Those who are likely to become the best hunters in the future enter the School of Heroes. John Yo-min said there will be those who want to invest in the student's abilities. If a student manages to get into the school, he begins to receive various offers from companies and simply rich people. And after completing their studies, such hunters pay part of their fees to investors or sign a contract and become an advertising face. Students are sponsored under different conditions. Yo-min herself received a scholarship from the Chinsen Group, so even after retirement, she is guaranteed a research position. John Yo-min thought that entering hero school would be beneficial. The School of Heroes provides many opportunities to evaluate your abilities. But first, it was necessary to enroll in this school. The level of difficulty of testing when transferring from another school is much higher than the usual entrance exam. Each applicant does everything possible, including preparing equipment. Zik Esserm said that he would help Charyung with this preparation. John Yo-min assured that her boss had already made arrangements for everything, and now all she had to do was go down to the underground workshop. The girl said that she would root for her new friend and hope that he would get in. When Charyung and Jin Sai-ram were walking to the elevator, the guy said that something terrible had happened and reminded her that the girl didn't seem to know about her uncle's help. Charyung realized that all those who wanted to transfer to this school would come very well prepared. Sai-ram said that she also wanted to help him and pay for the weapons. Charyung suddenly covered his face with his hands, and Jin Sai-ram asked what kind of reaction that was. The girl thought that everything turned out very well, because no matter how much money you spend, it is very important who you trust with the production. The production department of Chinsen Group is of quite high quality, which has received recognition all over the world. The friends took the elevator down to the production floor. Charyung said that for that kind of money, the equipment would be about the same everywhere. When the elevator doors opened, Charyung froze in amazement. The underground forge of the Chinsen Group Research Center was amazing. The name of this dungeon before the cleansing sounded like the boiling abyss. Jin Si-ram smiled at her companion and asked him how he liked it. Money alone was not enough to use this place. Charyung looked at him, absolutely shocked by what he saw. The friends didn't immediately notice that someone was watching them too. This creature had a single glowing eye. Charyung noticed the new character and turned around abruptly to face him. "Zeke," the creature growled. "How dare he wake me up on the weekend?" The monster in the white coat came out to his friends and asked why Zeke himself didn't want to go down. Charyung thought it was a dungeon monster. Jinzu-ram quickly blocked the guy's path, spreading her arms, and explained that he was the head of the production department. The monster confirmed that this was true. He was a department head and also a monster. For people, he was both. His name was Argus Thunderhammer, the senior titan, and he once received citizenship of the Republic of Korea in a simplified manner. Titan lit a huge cigar and asked who exactly Zeke was talking about. Then he pointed at Charyung and asked if he was talking about that little boy standing there, or if he was talking about Zeke's niece. Jin Si-ram recalled that a video with the readings was supposed to be sent from above. Argus grumbled that he knew nothing about human toys, neither about data nor about video. The department's employees dealt with this, but they wished him a good weekend and went home. Jin Si-ram was visibly upset, but Argus said it didn't matter. Titan reasoned that since Zeke had ordered him to personally make a weapon for Charyung, he could check for himself who he was dealing with. He asked Charyung if the spear was his main weapon. "Fine," said Argus. "Try to catch me, kid." Jin Se-ram asked what he meant. Titan stated that he did not know how this was done among people, but in his tribe it was a common procedure, because for the sake of a warrior whom he did not personally check, he would not work and make weapons. Argus felt that Charyung was a little different from ordinary young boys. Titan noticed the look of a man who was familiar with hunting. He had a feeling that the guy was already trained. Now he had to demonstrate his skills. "Wow," Charyung said, looking at Argus. "Hey you," Jin Si-ram called out to him. Charyung said that it was time to find out that he does not refuse such offers. Argus looked at Charyung, still holding the cigar in his mouth. Charyung didn't look away either. The fight began quickly and with bright flashes of power. Jin Se-ram watched the fight with her hands over her mouth. The unsmoked cigar fell to the floor. "It can't be," said the Titan. Charyung's spear was pressed against his chin, and Argus asked where he got such a weapon. Charyung didn't expect this either. He definitely delivered the blow. It was a clean move using the eagle technique. Of course, there were many monsters that he couldn't take down with one blow, but just now he literally felt a wall. Charyun didn't know about the stamina, but it felt like this creature wasn't alive. Argus loomed over his opponent, his eye glowing in the darkness. What kind of monster is this? Charyung thought. Se-ram was at a loss for another reason. She called her friend a fool who actually went to fight a higher titan. The danger level of monsters was indicated by stars. The flying mantis had a level of 1 star, which meant that such a monster could kill a person. An average adult male with a weapon in hand could handle a single-level monster. The cluster raptors were 2 stars in level. Only trained soldiers with firearms in their hands can deal with such a monster. The immature titan ape had a danger level of 3 stars. To defeat such a monster, motorized infantry and the introduction of armored weapons were required. Democulus had a 4-star level. In order to avoid numerous human casualties when this monster appeared, it was necessary to evacuate residents, avoiding any clashes with it. After evacuation, aerial or long-range bombardment is required. The maximum that the military can do is eliminate a monster with a 4-star danger level. In the case of a level of 5 stars and above, modern military forces are practically powerless. Even if the battle is won, they will have to expend a huge amount of firepower, and the destruction will be too great. Therefore, there are those who are able to defeat the monster with minimal losses for themselves. This is the Elite Hunter Squad. The Elder Titan's threat level was 7, but Argus Thunderhammer interrupted the duel to ask where Chaoryong got the weapon from. Jin Si-ram looked at Argus in terrible excitement. Chaoryong asked the Titan if one of the blows was painful, since he was so interested in his weapon. Argus extended his hand and said that the man had better answer his question immediately. He explained that he made this weapon himself. Argus stamped his foot, shaking the entire floor, and repeated his question. He wanted to know why his weapon was not in the hands of its owner, but in the hands of Chaoryong. Jin Si-ram nervously bit her nails and thought that if this weapon was made by Argus himself, then it was at least A rank. All the data on it should be in the association database. The owner of such a weapon is very closely monitored. It could not have fallen into the hands of a smuggler by honest means. Jin Si-ram wondered if Chaoryong had stolen it or taken it away. Chaoryong replied that he didn't want to talk and thought it was none of Argus' business. Jin Si-ram screamed that she better tell him. "Do as you wish," said Argus, and raised his hand to strike. At that moment, the thought of death flashed through Chaoryong's mind. It will be impossible to dodge this hand. You will have to take this blow. Chaoryong considered using Needle, but decided against it since his opponent had no obvious weak points. The swell technique was also useless, because Chaoryong would not be able to use the enemy's strength. Once he was hit by such a powerful blow, it would be the end for him. There was a third option left. There was one last technique that Chaoryong had seen and adopted from his father. It was this that the guy decided to use now. Argus was amazed by this move of Chaoryong. The law of force operated equally in all situations. In a head-on collision, the one who is bigger and stronger wins. Chaoryong decided to use a non-head-on collision. All that was needed was to calculate the angle and position for the strike. Even if he doesn't win, he'll at least be able to dodge it. This was Chaoryong's third weapon. Jin Si-ram couldn't believe her eyes. Chaoryong managed to dodge the attack of the level 7 monster. Now Chaoryong saw a weak spot where he could strike. All that remains is to pierce the Titan's only eye with the needle. The guy attacked the enemy according to his plan, but ended up in a strange device, similar to a vice, which he had instead of one hand. Argus had the man in this vice. Chaoryong was in very severe pain. Jin Si-ram screamed for the Titan to stop. She admitted that her friend looked suspicious, which was why Argus acted like that towards him. The girl said that the Titan still has no right to attack a person without finding out his circumstances. Se-ram reminded that those who received citizenship through a special procedure do not have the right to harm people unless their lives are in danger. The girl said that if Argus broke this rule, he would lose all his civil rights and return to the ranks of monsters. Argus let go of Chaoryong and told Jin Si-ram not to worry. He understood that very well. Se-ram rushed to Chaoryong to make sure he was okay. The guy was not hurt, but he felt pretty bruised. Titan asked again why his weapon was in this guy's possession. Argus wondered if that was why Zeke had woken him up on his day off. Argus apologized to Chaoryong and admitted that he had the right to the weapon. Titan said he would give the guy a good reward. Argus looked at the mark left by Chaoryong's successful strike and said that it had been about 30 years since he had last received any injuries. Jin Si-ram asked what the Titan was talking about, what right he meant. Argus asked the girl if she knew why he worked for people. Jin Si-ram suggested that the Special Hunter Squad had raided the Titan 30 years ago, but Argus countered that that was not the case. He asked if this was how people told each other this story, since in reality their swords had not even touched him. Argus was defeated by a single man. Titan said that this man cut off his hand and could have even killed him, but did not do so. Chaoryong looked closely at Argus's face. "Yes, kid," said the Titan, lighting his cigar again. He remembered the battle he went into in full armor. He had power and weapons then. The man who blocked his path, armed with an axe, was Yu Xiong, Yu Chaoryong's father. The Elder Titan is the one who has reached the highest level among the entire tribe of giants. His life was close to eternity. The number of such creatures was extremely small. No more than 10 Elder Titans were known on Earth. Even in terms of physical parameters, they have a considerable level. But their real strength lies in their ability to make powerful weapons and equipment. The innate talents of this tribe allowed them to create artifacts that contained special powers. Only Elder Titans and dwarves can boast of having such skills. But the dwarves are friendly to humans and coexist peacefully with them. The Elder Titans do not perceive humans as beings worthy of communication. It happened 30 years ago, the operation to capture Argus. Colossus B was an Argesian automaton with an estimated 4-star rating. Oh Seung-ah, a gunner from the 9th Special Squad Team, waited in vain for communication with headquarters to be restored. Her assistant Kim Yeon-mo said that the communication magic wasn't working, as if someone was deliberately creating interference. Park Jong-man, their captain and tank, shouted that the monster was approaching. Everyone should prepare for impact. Colossus B moved towards them, armed with a sword and shield. Park Young-man exerted all his special powers. Oh Seung-a was carried away by the power of this battle. She attacked the Colossus decisively. She managed to fly up to the level of Colossus's face to try and damage him. Oh Seung-a's gaze became completely empty from surprise and fear. It was as if many swords were aimed at her. With such force, the Colossus repelled the blows aimed at him and destroyed the enemy. Kim Yong-mo was trembling with fear. In this dungeon, his squad was presented with a picture that they did not expect to see. They were the Special Forces, a top-notch organization that could boast of their achievements in clearing the dungeons of their time. However, they were unable to defeat the hell that was happening in the Dungeon of Argus. This was the 7th Colossus their team had encountered. Ki Yong-mo thought that it was necessary to run as far as possible, even if they eventually defeated this Colossus. The next ones could appear from somewhere at any moment. If other teams were in the same situation, Kim Yong-mo could at least try to leave himself. Their captain said so. He also understood that they all would not survive. The Colossus went on the attack again. Kim Yen-mo turned towards this enemy. The captain used the potential trigger technique, which activated all of the power without leaving any traces and allowed the effect to last longer than usual. Once the skill expires, the user loses the ability to even move. Park Young-man used a shield strike against the Colossus. Kim Yong-mo shouted that if the captain used potential trigger, it would be suicide. Park Young-mon said that not everyone would survive and that he would not be able to defeat the Colossus on his own. But it was possible to try to stall for time so that Kim Yen-mo could escape. Park Young-man smiled and said that who knows, maybe he will win. He didn't expect to see what happened next. "What is this?" asked both Special Forces fighters. The Titan appeared and asked if there were any bugs left that he had not yet removed. At that moment, they realized that they had no chance of survival. "Run!" Park Young-man shouted as loudly as he could. The captain was going to use his last chance. He thought that if he used all his strength now, he could at least buy a little time. The Titan swept him away with one blow, his sword sending up a wave of flame around him. Park Young-man was burned in this flame. "What nonsense?" asked the Titan. He didn't believe that people called such trash equipment, that's all. And the human body itself was of low quality. Titan could not believe that such creatures proclaimed themselves masters of this world. The earth seemed like a miserable place to him. Kim Yen-mo did not leave, but tried to attack the enemy with his spear. Titan said that in this man, he sees at least loyalty and moral duty. This impressed him, albeit only a little. Kim Yen-mo thought that he couldn't do anything. Even the commander couldn't cope with this monster, and his magic was certainly not enough. "I told you that you shouldn't come here so thoughtlessly," said another warrior who joined them. It was Yu Sung. He said that it was much safer to gather information little by little and then go inside with a combined force, since there was no point in them attacking such a monster first. Kim Yeon-mo didn't know this man and was shocked by his appearance and appearance. Yu Sung was naked to the waist. Yu Sung identified himself as one of the volunteers who received a call for help. He was sent here by the Hunters Association. At that time, Yu Sung was 32 years old. Kim Young-mo was still looking at the stranger with surprise, and catching his gaze, Yu Sung explained that it was inconvenient for him to run in the armor. The new ones were heavier than he thought, so he took them off. It was hard to believe that this man came to fight the Titan all alone. Yu Sung said that no one else could come down here except him. After these words, Yu Sung stood in front of the Colossus. The dungeon where the battle took place looked like a ceremonial hall with columns and high arches. How strong, Kim Yen-mo thought, looking at his unexpected ally. Yu Sung said that there was only chaos up there, and then asked how many more monsters were there. Until this moment, Yu Sung was an unknown hunter that few people knew about. He was one of the first generation of hunters. His name should have slipped out somewhere. But instead of fame and achievements, he paid more attention to saving others, so he did not immediately achieve fame. However, after this incident, everything changed. Yu Sung was able to prove himself in that battle as a fighter of incredible power. He easily defeated the first Colossus single-handedly. Argus turned around, a question in his one eye. The whole world then found out who Yu Song was. The warrior attacked the Elder Titan, stating that this opponent looked a little more difficult. This can't be, thought Qin Yanmo, completely shocked by what was happening. This monster could only be caught by uniting all the forces of its team. And this man knocked him to the ground with one blow. "Hey mage," Yu Sung asked, "do you have any mana left?" Qin Yanmo didn't immediately understand that the warrior was addressing him, but then he replied that there was a little left, enough for a simple spell to increase abilities. Yu Sung replied that there was no need to increase his abilities, but he wanted to know if Qin Yanmo could use magic to make objects fly. "Take these two and get out of here," he heard. "They are both still alive." "Up and leave?" asked the voice, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. "You speak as if you have the right to choose," noted Titan Argus. Naturally, Yu Song answered him, and added that without his permission the Titan would not touch a hair on the head of any of the people. The Elder Titan's eye turned bloodshot with rage. His attack was powerful and raised a wave of flame. Yu Sun's power surrounded the warrior with a bright bluish glow. The opponent's blades crossed, despite the fact that one was much taller than the other and in other dimensions. Qin Yanmo used magic to lift his wounded comrades to carry them out of this dungeon, but he still couldn't help but turn around to look at the battle raging behind him. 10 years have passed since the merger. At that time, the hunters faced one problem. The released power and the increase in their physical abilities allowed them to approach the level of superhumans. They also mastered the technique of making equipment using materials obtained in the dungeons, which helped them develop their skills very quickly. But in contrast to their high performance and equipment, they did not use their weapons as skillfully. The answer that was able to break through this wall was human technology. Argus, not expecting to meet any kind of worthy opponent, was faced with a completely new combat system that went beyond the accepted ones. At that time, only a few hunters felt the need to explore this area and trained hard. The Elder Titan Argus suddenly encountered just such a person. Yu Sung was one of those hunters. Qin Yangmo couldn't stop watching Yu Song's performance in battle. The mage's face lit up with triumph as he realized that the human was winning against the monster. But what happened next was incomprehensible and alarmed Qin Yanmo. Titan Argus leaned over Yu Song and said that compared to the others, he was on a completely different level. This warrior knew exactly how to use his power. Argus believed that if Yu Song's weapon could keep up with the warrior's abilities even halfway, the situation would have ended completely differently. At that time, Yu Song was an unknown hunter. He had no opportunity to acquire a high-rank weapon for himself, so he answered Argus, which was something he was used to. Yu Sung heard something happening behind him. Looking over his shoulder, he saw that the magician and his companions had already reached the door to leave the dungeon. Now nothing distracted Yu Sung from the battle anymore. The opponent's weapons clashed again with fury. Argus reported that Yu Song was the most outstanding in his technique of any person he had ever seen. But the hammer that the hunter wielded seemed to the Elder Titan to be the most terrible in quality of all the weapons encountered by the people of this world. Argus' blow caused cracks to appear on the hammer, and Argus noticed that the durability of the object had reached its limit. "This is the end," declared the Elder Titan, looming over his opponent and swinging for the killing blow. It took incredible effort for Yu Sun to avoid certain death. The hunter took the blow in an unusual way, thanks to which the hammer withstood it. Argus was surprised that Yu Sun's low-quality weapon did not break. This was a technique that Chaoryong later observed and was called swell, a skill that allowed the hunter to take a blow and use its force. The swell demonstrated physical strength, experience, and perfection of movements. Everything was on a completely different level. This was the hero's martial art. As the Elder Titan Argus finished his story, Chaoryong and Jin Se-ram listened to the story in silence, and Arnis assumed that there was nothing unusual in this story for them. "The hero has finally defeated the monster," said the Elder Titan. At that moment, due to the move that Yu Song used, the monster that Argus was then died. Titan stubbed out his cigar on the floor. Looking at Chaoryong, Argus explained that his life from that moment on no longer belonged to him, but to his father. But Yu Seong did not kill the defeated enemy. As a result, the clearing of the dungeon, which the special squad failed, was declared its victory, which many were very happy about, taking it for a miracle. After that, something truly unexpected happened. The Elder Titan race considers all other races to be beneath them, and will never bow down to their representatives. But Argus voluntarily surrendered to the humans and asked for asylum. Jin Se-ram thought that she had definitely studied this great event and knew how the whole world had been shaken then. And then he was given citizenship. There were no fatalities in that raid, but there were many wounded. But, in the end, he was guilty. So, until he served his full sentence, he had to work here, in the special department. And now it turned out that Argus was defeated by one person, which was very different from what Jin Se-ram had once taught. "I made this poll myself," Argus said. He said that Yu Seon didn't ask him for anything, but he was a warrior who was worthy of a real weapon. Cha Ryung looked at the spear in his hands and admitted that he had never heard of all this. When he was little, he thought it was just a sturdy pole with no special functions. But now Cha Ryung understood why his father didn't give it to the creditors. "Yes, that's exactly it," agreed Argus. "It's just a very hard stick that's easy to twirl." Cha Ryung looked at his interlocutor questioningly, while Jin Se-ram turned to the guy, surprised by the word creditors. "Everything is simple here," Argus grinned. He asked the boy why he thought his father had used an empty pole. Argus planned to give Yu Seong the finished weapon if only he could obtain suitable materials for the blade. But at some point, the connection with Yusun was broken. This was exactly when the disease struck the hero. Argus could not go to him himself, so he sent the part of the weapon that was already ready. The Elder Titan didn't know the details, but he thought that it would be impossible to finish this weapon. "But that's not bad either," said Argus, and extended his hand. He told Cha Ryong to give him this pole. Titan wanted to finish his work so that it would be a weapon no longer for Yusun, but for his son. Cha Ryung and Jin Se-ram escaped from the production department. The guy was silent, and Se-ram looked at him with curiosity. She asked Cha Ryung how he was feeling. The guy replied that he felt okay, but it seemed that the last grip wasn't very strong. Argus said he didn't know how long it would take, but he would try to do it as quickly as possible. Titan said that there was no point in rushing him. The masterpiece should reach perfection on its own. Cha Ryung and Jin Se-ram went outside. It was already dark, and the girl said that this Wednesday would be a day off, then asked if it was okay for Cha Ryung. She suggested that they spend that day preparing for the written exam and also take a practice test. Cha Ryung replied that he didn't care. The girl remembered one more thing and decided to find out. She said that Cha Ryung's father seemed to be an outstanding person, and she imagined that the raid was completed thanks to Yu Sung. Jin Se-ram assumed that he was now retired and being treated in the hospital. Cha Ryung said that he would go from here. He didn't want the girl to give him a ride because he wanted to walk a bit and think. Jin Se-ram didn't argue. After the boy left, Se-ram's car sped through the night streets. The girl decided to study the information on the Argus case again. Everything was laid out there as she had imagined before, but now she heard the Elder Titan himself telling it. If this was true, then it meant that those 5 legendary hunters from the special squad had taken credit for someone else's work. It was very hard to believe, but Argus had no reason to lie. And if we recall the abilities that Cha Ryong demonstrated, it was quite obvious that his father was a unique master. There had been many such cases before, the girl thought, because it was impossible to check what had happened in the dungeon. There was a famous event also related to Yu Sung, who was called the False Dragon Slayer, the best hunter in South Korea with excellent skills. Most of the achievements that were recorded in history were faked and rewritten with threats. Surely after Yu Sung got injured, everything became known, Jin Se-ram thought. At that moment, the girl found other information that confirmed that it was Yu Song who turned out to be the hero who resolved the situation with Argus, and that there was a bad relationship between the warrior and the special forces. The girl received a new message on her phone, which contained a report card for the practical exam. There was almost no one in the Hero High School's dungeon clearing department's staff room. Only Cho Se-ah, the homeroom teacher of class 1 to 2 and the magic instructor, was sitting at her computer. She turned to the second person in the room and apologized for him not being able to properly rest on the weekend because of her. Kang Jung-guk assured that everything was fine, since the girl was a homeroom teacher for the first time, and he himself had to check the grade sheets of the first-year students. Cho Se-ah said that everything turned out even better than she expected. She meant both the work and the level of the students, which was simply incomparable to what it was like when she studied. The girl asked if Kang Jung-guk knew that this particular student would take first place in the practical exam. The man replied that it was difficult to predict such a result. At this time, Jin Se-ram was staring at her phone screen in shock in her car. Everyone knew that there were currently 3 students in the first year who were called geniuses. It was unexpected, but all 3 were of mixed blood, the first of them being Choi Diav. He possessed sword skills inherited from his father, a white-ranked hunter, as well as magical powers inherited from his elf mother. The second student was Anisha Esserm. This girl has magical skills that even a pure-blooded elf could envy. In the future, she will certainly achieve great success and reach a high level. And the third disciple was born from the union of a man and a dwarf. From the latter, he inherited strength and durability, and from humans' flexibility and agility, he absorbed the strongest aspects of both races. His name was Tir Belkison, and his Korean name was Seok Chul-gang, a rising star. He had the best physical ability not only in the hero school but in the entire world. And it was this student who took first place in the midterm exams. In fact, the teachers had no doubts about Chul-gang's skill. He was in no way inferior to the other two. But usually the leaders take the first places in the exam, even though the difficulty level was low. Chul-gang took the first place alone. Kang Jung-guk noticed that loners usually had their advantages, and physical strength was not the only merit of this student. Cho Se-ah admitted that she was a little worried because Chul-gang had all the potential to become the leader. However, this guy was not at all interested in communicating with other guys. Not only classmates from the same faculty, but also other students were afraid of Chul-gang. Cho Se-ah thought that in the future, already in the second year, there was not much that could be done alone, and it would be nice to have at least one friend with whom she could share her thoughts. But Chul-gang was not interested in this at all. Kang Jung-guk said that maybe Cho Se-ah shouldn't worry too much about it. He said that it often happens that guys are not what they seem on the outside. Kang Jung-guk said that worrying about the students is of course good, but he thought it would be better to believe them. Sometimes it helps. 3 days passed, Wednesday arrived. The streets were sunny and quite empty. Two young men were discussing someone with malicious laughter. One asked if the fool really said that. Suddenly, the shadow of a tall and large man loomed over him, and the guy dropped his cup of coffee in surprise. Both interlocutors turned around. One had an expression of annoyance on his face. The other looked on in amazement. The man who approached them was enormous. "Sorry," Seok Chul-gang said, and explained that he had not noticed the people because he was walking and thinking about his own things. The young men were frightened and hastened to assure that it was their own fault. Chul-gang looked at them thoughtfully. He thought that he was very unlucky. He was immersed in his own thoughts and missed his mother very much. He recalled how, as children, they tried tteokbokki, a very tasty dish. Seok Yubin told him that she was a bad cook and therefore could not prepare food for her son on her own. She was a Korean huntress who worked mainly in Europe, and she had a great reputation. She often told her son about her homeland, which she missed. So Chul-gang felt sympathy for Korea from an early age. This was the atmosphere in which he grew up. His personal qualities allowed him to enter the School of Heroes on special grounds. If we talk about problems, he was not very sociable and could not establish contact with his peers. Seok Chul-gang spent all his time alone. He would have been happy to talk to his classmates, but he was not fluent in Korean and was afraid that others would say that he had bad pronunciation, which is a characteristic of an introvert. Even if you know a foreign language, it is still difficult to talk. He watched his peers communicating from afar and thought that he really didn't like his own character. Occasionally, one of the students would turn to him to apologize for the noise. The students were wary of Chul-gang and behaved carefully around him, even trying not to speak too loudly in his presence. And that was how the first semester passed. Chul-gang, without wanting to, acquired the image of a majestic wolf. His only hobby became lonely walks on the street on weekends. He wondered if there would be room, since usually everything was already packed in the morning. Chul-gang stood in front of the door where other young people were entering. Mom told him how she sometimes went with her friends to karaoke or a computer club. "When you play games," she said, "it's delicious to order something and eat." Chul-gang tried to follow her advice. It was difficult for him to figure out the terminal. He was distracted by the words of the people nearby, by how someone was asking on the phone when his friend would come, because if they had agreed on the morning, he couldn't be so late. At this time, Seok Chul-gang was trying to register. A line formed behind him. People looked at him. The one who was talking on the phone said that only rich people have no concept of time at all. Seok Chul-gang thought that he was only bothering everyone and decided to go home, since he was alone anyway. Suddenly, the guy with the phone said that registration should be done differently. He explained that you can only charge here, but registration needs to be done elsewhere. It was Cha-ryung, and he offered Seok Chul-gang to go with him so he could show him how to register. Cha-ryung explained which fields need to be filled in and which are optional. He said that if Chul-gang had sorted out the registration, then he could go back to that device and charge it there. Choose a place again, log in, and that's it. Seok Chul-gang thanked the stranger. Cha-ryung said that there was nothing to thank him for and wished him a pleasant game. Cha-ryung was curious if this man was a foreigner, since he spoke Korean well, but it seemed like this was his first time at a computer club. Then the guy thought about Jin Si-ram, who wrote that she would definitely come by 2:30. This was very annoying. If Cha-ryung knew in advance that this would happen, he would not have gotten out of bed at 9 in the morning, or it would have been better to go to the black market first. He wanted to know what kind of find he had. It was in that box of royal jelly. He thought it was in there. It didn't look like the item was edible. Charyung was going to check the item after some time had passed, because selling items related to the heavenly wasps now was tantamount to suicide. Only the Chinsei Ram medallion, blood of Enkil, could be exchanged for cash. Enkil, the reptile tyrant, was one of the 3 scourges of the Igaran jungle. Over the past decades, countless numbers of special forces have been assembled to destroy it. But so far, not a single raid has been successful. All that has been obtained is a few broken scales and a little bit of blood. Nowadays, hunting Enkil has been banned, and the price for items like the blood medallion has skyrocketed. Charyung had planned to meet Se Ram at lunch and go to the black market in the evening. But now the whole schedule has shifted. Seok Chulgang approached Charyung again and said that there were simply no seats in the hall, like any introvert. This guy was cautious and looked around even when there was no need. Charyung replied that it was lunchtime and also a day off. He invited Chulgang to sit next to him because he himself was no longer waiting for anyone. Chulgang logged into his account and realized that there weren't really any games that could only be played here, and he realized that he liked playing at home much more. Charyung noticed that his neighbor was doing something interesting and turned to look at him. He asked if the stranger played Heroes of Chaos, and then saw that the level was almost the same as his own. Chulgang was embarrassed, and Charyung apologized for asking at the first meeting and admitted that he didn't have any friends who also played. He suggested to Chulgang that they try playing this game together. At that time, there were ruins here and there in the center of Seoul, which were called scars. During the confluence, a huge part of the city, almost all of Seoul, was destroyed by monsters. Most areas were eventually rebuilt, with the exception of areas close to the dungeons. The space between the wall guarding the dungeons and the city served as a kind of cushion to soften the blow if monsters got over the wall and an emergency was declared. In order to pass through the gate, it was necessary to send a request. A special duty officer confirmed the opening of the entrance and checked who was allowed through it. In the last 20 years, there has not been a single case where the monsters themselves have gone beyond this wall. There were special vehicles for transporting small and medium-sized monsters under guard. Every time in such moments you realize reality, said the driver behind the wheel of a special vehicle. He said that his so-called colleagues hunt monsters and make money, while he gets pennies for driving a car. His companion, Cho Yeon-ah, asked him not to start this whining again. If he didn't like something, he could always quit and go back to serve. She held a special position in the Hunters Association, was a former gold rank hunter, quit when she lost an eye. The driver, Song Chang-woo, was a former bronze rank hunter, and Jung Yeon-ah asked him why he took this job in the first place. She said that he only had a license but no ability to find a decent team. He himself should have understood that he would not receive more anywhere than as an employee of the association. Song Chang-woo said that there was no need to tell him so directly. He just grumbled a little while their car sped along the city street. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. "What just happened?" Song Chang-woo exclaimed. He asked if the monster had come out of the back compartment, but Cho Yeon-ah said that was unlikely. They stopped and Jong Yeon-ah got out of the cabin, telling her companion to call the center and say that they were delayed for a short time for verification. Jong Yeon-ah slammed the cabin door. Song Chang-woo explained over the radio that the boss had ordered him to stop and check. He thought that no matter what happened, the boss was nearby, so everything would be fine, because if it weren't for her injury, she would already be among the best hunters. The door opened and a stranger entered, apparently sent by the center. Song Chang-woo told her that she was a good girl. The stranger shook her hands and said it was nothing. Song Chang-woo thought that she had quite a quick reaction for a civil servant, but maybe she wasn't a civil servant. The stranger began to look through the list of those in the trunk. She asked Song Chang-woo why he wasn't doing anything. The stranger's eyes lit up red, and she ordered the driver to press the pedal if he didn't want to die. At this time, Cha Ryong finished the game with a victory and said that he was very tired. He and Chul Gang ordered a bowl of noodles each, and Cha Ryong asked if his unexpected game partner was enjoying it. He himself believed that the food was delicious here. The owner of the establishment was a real master. Cha Ryong was surprised when he found out that Seok Cheolgang was the same age as him. He was very tall and big, with pumped-up muscles. Cha Ryong asked what school his new acquaintance went to, but Cheolgang was embarrassed and did not answer. Suddenly, a sudden event attracted everyone's attention. The floor and furniture around shook. People asked each other if it was an earthquake. Cha Ryong stood up. He thought that the sound that came out was more like an explosion rather than an earthquake. They left the club to see what had happened. A huge truck crashed into a building. Maybe a drunk driver got behind the wheel. It was unclear how the truck ended up in that place. People started filming the incident on their phones. Someone asked if they shouldn't report it first, but there were a lot of people. One could hope that someone had already called. The woman standing on the roof listened as people regretted the incident because it disrupted their plans. Some wanted to continue watching the spectacle. In a few minutes, the alarm will be sounded and the hunters will arrive here. But the woman said on the phone that she was sure that she would not be caught. There was a narrow black crack running across the roof of the truck, but the woman said it was nothing to worry about. She said that she woke up the boys, and at that moment clawed paws appeared from the crack. People looked in horror at what was coming out. There were several monsters called horned horror. Their level of danger depended on the number of horns they had. "And who bet on 50 people?" asked the woman on the roof. And then she smiled and said that she would put it up too. She was sure that at least 100 would die before the rescuers arrived. The monsters easily caught up with the people who had started to run and grabbed their heads with their claws. They blocked the escape routes of the fugitives. People in the city had never encountered such creatures before. They did not know how to fight, and a wave of power flowed between them. It was Charyung's strength that quickly intervened in the carnage. The hunter decisively attacked the first monster. People looked in shock at what this strange guy was doing. Charyung threw the first monster back 10 steps with a well-aimed blow. He assumed an attack position, ready to continue the fight. "What are you standing there for?" he asked over his shoulder at the people around him. "Run away from here quickly," he ordered. Charyung thought that he had seen such monsters before. A horned terror with one horn simply wasn't as dangerous. Suddenly, Charyung saw something he didn't expect at all. A motorcycle flew through the air above him. Charyung pushed him away with force and touched the ground with his hand. He exhaled and saw his next opponent. The monster flew towards him through the air, its hand with claws already reaching out to the guy. It was difficult to confront such a sudden enemy. Charyung had to use all the energy he had available to him. The horned horror was known to live on average 5 to 6 years. Most of them die with only one horn, but a small portion, about 8% of monsters, may develop a second horn, the ability to reproduce, and a longer lifespan. And to all this comes physical strength, several times greater than that of an ordinary individual. Charyung saw that this opponent was fast and strong, but not so much that he couldn't handle him. He would catch him somehow. The guy saw the problem in his own vulnerability. His body's strength might not be sufficient. Compared to the tank he had fought with earlier, Charyung was 3 to 4 times more durable. Unfortunately, he didn't have a spear with him, nor any working equipment at all. The monster rushed to attack. It took all of Charyung's agility to avoid a blow that could easily shatter a stone wall. Landing a few steps away from the enemy, Charyung looked at him again. It was a two-horned horned horror. Its threat level was approximately 2 stars. One thing caught Charyung's eye. A road sign, a plate that said "No entry," was lying on the sidewalk. Charyung decisively broke the road sign by stepping on it with his foot. Now he had a pole long enough to fight with. The monster went on the attack again. Charyung tested his new weapon. He gripped the pole tightly in his hand. The horned horror pushed off the ground. The monster leapt and jumped over Charyung. The guy didn't understand why the monster did this. Behind him, it seemed like another explosion was heard. There were people where the monster landed. There were 3 boys, one of whom said that there was no need to stand still but to run quickly. All monsters have their own level of danger. The difference between 2 and 3 stars in 3 was simply huge. The destructive power itself was far beyond the level of human capabilities. An ordinary person would simply be torn to pieces by such a monster. Even for highly capable hunters, it would be reckless to fight this beast without special equipment and magic. But there were exceptions. Seokchul Gang stopped the monster's strike with his bare hand, simply intercepting its outstretched paw. It took a lot of effort for him to hold the monster back, and yet he managed to push the horned horror away from himself. Only high-rank tanks with outstanding innate qualities were capable of such a confrontation. The horned terror's claws scraped the pavement tiles, causing sparks to fly. Chalgang thought he had stopped him by force, but it would be difficult to deal a fatal blow to a third-rank monster. Suddenly, he saw that the monster's attention was attracted by someone else. Another man dealt the horned horror several blows. Charyung hurried towards the monster, stating that it irritated him when his opponent was distracted. Charyung used the needle to hit the monster's most vulnerable spot. Seokchul Gang watched this fight with surprise. The fatal blow to the horned horror was dealt by his random computer gaming partner. Charyung stood nearby, holding a road sign pole in his hand. Charyung and Cheol Gang noticed each other. They also saw a flame from an explosion flare up at the opposite end of the yard. Charyung thought that only less than a minute had passed. Cheol Gang said that it would take at least a few more minutes before rescuers arrived. Chalgang said that he heard the distress signal. But this whole situation was still very unexpected. While the rescuers were on their way, people could die here. Seok Chalgang could use provocation cry. It was a basic move that any tank could use. It was a technique of attracting monsters with a piercing scream. Seok Chalgang, who dreamed of becoming a hunter, was already prepared for the fact that it was necessary to distract the monsters before the rescuers arrived. But he couldn't offer the other guy to risk his life together, so he wanted Charyung to take refuge inside the building. They just played computer games together today. But Charyung told him to scream. He asked Chalgun if he was a tank, then he should have this shout move that attracts monsters. Seok Chalgang said that it would be very dangerous here then, but Charyung said that he was going to fight anyway, even alone. He said that if he were in his interlocutor's place, he would think twice about it. But he was not alone. Charyung said that Chalgang fights well, plays well, and also protects people. Charyung thought that somehow it happened that he started to act like a hunter. But it was because of my father and it wasn't so bad. Since it happened that way, we have to continue playing the game properly. You didn't have such a chance, did you? He asked and suggested trying his hand. The supermarket nearby was a real mess. One of the employees sat under the table and shook with fear. The horned horror stood over the table and dealt with another vendor. At this moment, Seok Chalgang was taking a deep breath to perform his special move. The seller's body fell to the floor. The horned horror leaned over the shelter where the second store employee had disappeared. Seok Chalgang let out his thunderous cry, putting special energy into it. The scream echoed throughout the entire block. The monster in the store was also attracted by this sound. At this point, he had almost reached the trembling salesman. The woman on the roof also heard the cry of appeal. "What's the matter?" she asked out loud. Friends also observed the effects of the calling cry. Seok Chalgang finished calling the monsters and turned to face the enemy. Many monsters were heading straight towards them. One of the horned horrors pointed a clawed finger at Seok Chalgang. Those who went first had almost reached their destination. The target was still the hunter who had summoned them. Chalgang looked at them carefully. One of the monsters rushed to attack. Chalgang parried his blows with his bare hands. The monster's fist crashed into the man's forearm. Seok Chalgang used special energy. She helped him repel the attack. Chalgang focused on the upcoming battle. He was attacked by several monsters at once. One of the monsters froze, sensing the appearance of another character. Charyung hurried to join the battle. He landed right among the monsters that surrounded Chalgang. Two of them had two horns, Charyung noticed. Then he saw that there was also some movement near the broken truck. The monsters collected human corpses and threw them into a truck. Charyung understood why there were no corpses on the street. One of the two horned monsters was already rushing to attack Charyung. Charyung prepared himself for battle. He thought that with the usual way of hunting, he had no chance of success. Seok Chalgang said that they were both fighting from a close combat position, and not only did they lack cover at a distance, but they also lacked proper equipment. It will be a regular team game without the opportunity to give it your all, and teammates will only get in each other's way. Therefore, it was necessary to distribute the tasks. For Chalgang, as a tank, it was better to take on those who were weaker but superior in numbers. Charyung had unique fighting skills. He could deal with those monsters that were fewer in number but stronger. Charyung thus found himself an opponent of the two horned ones. He struck and quickly dodged counterattacks. The horned horror didn't expect this from a human. Charyung thought that, compared to Needle, he lacked power. If he had had the pole he gave to Argus, he would have mastered the needle in a few strokes. But with such an ordinary metal as the pole from the road sign, Charyung couldn't fight with his full strength. And yet he managed to cope with the fight. Charyung understood that it would not work to act using the usual methods, but he roughly understood what he needed to do. That guy probably fought barehanded too, except for one or two blows. Mostly they weren't that fast. But Charyung received minor injuries that restricted his movements, like clothes that got wet from the rain. The two-horned monster rushed towards him again. Charyung managed to repel his attack. He looked at his opponent with an attentive gaze. He had to fight in terrible conditions, where a minute's mistake could cost him his life. Charyung adjusted his grip on his weapon. The boy dealt a well-aimed blow to the horned horror. As it had been until now, Charyung took advantage of the conditions that had been given to him. They helped him rise to another level. Now, deprived of his usual advantages, he looked for new ways to win. He was able to use techniques that could defeat even the horned horror. Charyung remembered how Esser moved during their fight. He tried to repeat them the way he remembered them. After his father, this was the first time Charyung had encountered a hunter with such power. There was a fourth technique that Charyung managed to master. This technique was called Rainfall, and it was what Charyung used this time. The battle with the horned horror continued. A powerful paw grabbed the man by the leg. Charyung looked at the monster that had caught him. The horned horror threw him to the ground with great force. Charyung coughed and blood came out of his mouth. 2-1, he said, struggling to his feet. He said he might look a little pathetic, but there was no other way. This was not a fair fight with a man, but a battle with a monster that had already raised its paws to strike. Therefore, Charyung also had no intention of following the rules. Cholgang came to his aid, knocking the monster down. Charyung said that a team's luck is also an ability. Both friends were unaware that they were being watched from a large window of one of the nearby buildings. The spectacle seemed incredible to the observers. These two guys together, without any equipment, took down more than 10 horned horrors. Cho Dong-yoon, the leader of the Dungeon Explorers Club, filmed the battle on his phone. He was very happy that he managed to film such a story. It was not in vain that he risked his life and stayed here. The second guy, who was also filming the video, said he was so scared that even his legs went numb. It was Kim Chang-hyun, a member of the same circle, who was able to see that the fighters looked even younger than he was. Judging by the number of monsters killed in the Danger Stars, those who fought there were not below the gold rank. Perhaps they were students of the School of Heroes, or super rookie hunters who were simply unknown to anyone yet. In fact, this was not the most important thing. Cho Dong-yoon asked his companion if he could edit a short video on his laptop so that he could upload it online right away. He said that if he did it after the news came out, it would be too late. He assumed it would get at least 1 million views or even 10 million. Seok Chul-gang looked at Charyung. He immediately thought that this guy also just wanted to stall for time until the rescuers arrived. He looked at the traces of the battle. He never expected that they would be able to cope together. "You stand so beautifully that it's even awkward to speak out loud," Seok Chul-gang heard. Charyung asked his friend to give him a hand and help him stand up. Chul-gang easily lifted his friend to his feet. Chul-gang asked if Charyung was okay, and he admitted that, to be honest, he wasn't quite okay. Charyung winced and said that both here and there were a little sore. Although compared to what he expected, he was still intact. Seok Chul-gang said that his new acquaintance was simply amazing when he single-handedly defeated the other two. Charyung countered that Chul-gang had managed to deal with 9 monsters and had even helped finish off one of the 2-horned ones, but Chul-gang believed that the second-level monsters weren't that difficult. Seok Chul-gang asked which school Charyung goes to. He realized that the rumors did not quite match reality, because at the School of Heroes they say that everyone else is much weaker than those who study there. Chul-gang felt like he was being tactless and apologized. He didn't mean that Charyung's school was bad, that's just what they say. Charyung thought that his new acquaintance was also studying at the hero school. Although given his abilities, it wasn't surprising. Charyung asked where Cheol-gang was on the list of students. He wanted to know how many more of his peers were stronger than him. Seok Chul-gang admitted that he didn't even know, because he didn't communicate closely with the guys from the school. He, of course, tried his hand at exams several times, but he thought that exams and abilities were different things. Seok Chul-gang thought that he was somewhere in the middle, and these words shocked Charyung. Charyung remembered what Seiram had said about the hero school's bar being too high, and the girl was even afraid that she would be kicked out. Suddenly, Charyung noticed another monster and asked if it would stay in place. The last horned horror froze on the roof of the truck. Charyung said that it seemed like this monster was resistant to summoning. Chul-gang didn't understand how that could be, unless this monster was somehow different from the others. "If there is anything special, it is not about him," Charyung said. The area around the truck was stained with blood, and so was the body. The crack in the body was also covered in blood. Charyung said that something special was inside. Seok Chul-gang suggested that they just watch him for now. The one on the roof was one-horned. They could deal with him quickly. He wouldn't even have time to harm people. Something was happening in the back of the truck on its own. The horned horror approached the crack in the body. Charyung and Seok Chul-gang looked at what was happening with confusion. Something in the back of the truck pulled the monster inside, despite the fact that it tried to grab the lining with its claws. Just a moment, and the horned horror completely disappeared inside. Charyung asked if it was trying to devour the horned terror. The horned horror was a tribal-type monster. The 2 horned individuals were considered the parents and heads of the tribe. Tribes had 10 individuals. When several tribes united, they became stronger and reproduced faster. However, there were limitations here. In the harsh world of the dungeons, the horned horror was considered below average, as the number of individuals was always regulated by the top predators. At some point, this order was disrupted by the appearance of a mutant with 3 horns. He had already become not just the leader of a tribe, but the king of an army of thousands. It was a horned terror Rex. Its threat rating was estimated at 5 stars. It was this monster that now emerged from the back of the truck. Cha Ryung and Seok Cheol Gang had never experienced anything like this before. Scarlet flames rose into the air. It looked like a streak of scarlet flame separating the friends. The enemy appeared next to Chae Ryung in a flash. Cha Ryung tried to use the flow. With a powerful blow, the monster broke the only weapon the man had. The next blow landed on Cha Ryung, causing him to spit out a clot of blood. The monster threw Cha Ryung aside a few steps. Seok Cheol Gang rushed towards the monster and grabbed it with his powerful arms. Horned terror. Rex pushed off the ground, rocks breaking under his footsteps. Cheol Gang's eyes glowed with energy. He fought the horned horror, straining every ounce of his strength. Rex grabbed Cheol Gang and lifted him above his head with his arms outstretched. He threw it on the ground, causing it to crack. They didn't have enough time. 2 young guys with outstanding abilities will definitely reach the top level someday. But this moment was not destined to come today. Determination, courage, tenacity, emotion. They could use everything they had against the enemy they had been dealt. But even then, they could not make up for the difference in his absolute numbers. Cha Ryung rose to his feet with a last effort. He was all wounded. The horned horror stood before him, its power blazing scarlet. The crimson stream strike sent Cha Ryung flying again. Rex looked at him. His black eyes with red pupils expressed some strong feeling. The king of the horned horrors stood among the city of men. Currently, when Yu Sung was in the hospital, there was no one who knew exactly what kind of person he once was. No one knew him before he lost his identity. His son now stood before a monster whose power was too great for him. There was no one else in this world who could say with certainty what Yu Sung left behind. A bright purple energy engulfed Cha Ryung as if he was on fire. This incident happened 11 years ago. One man made a confession to journalists. Yu Sung came out in front of multiple cameras and microphones to admit the mistakes he made and apologize. This confession shocked the world, and many years later, Jin Se-ram watched the old footage. 12 hours before Chulgong and Cha Ryung's decisive battle with the Horned Terror, Se-ram was in a state of complete confusion. The truth that she now learned would not leave her head. For 2 days, these records of past events tormented her. She drank tea and thought that Cha Ryung's father might have really been unfairly convicted. She could fully understand why he agreed to everything, because he had lost his power, and there was probably more than one person who was aiming for his place. But one moment was unclear to Jin Se-ram, the one when he was falsely accused. It all started with victim blaming. The news reported that Yu Song had falsified the fact of 43 achievements. The materials presented and the testimony of witnesses were simply shocking. At the same time, there were contradictions. Not all commentators believed this revelation. Even with fake evidence, Yu Sung's image did not look so bad. Jin Se-ram thought that if she were in this man's place, she would fight to the end, trying to prove her innocence. But not only did Yu Song not do anything wrong, he admitted everything and didn't say a word against these accusations. After the press conference, the media calmed down, and Yu Sung remained in people's memories as a fraud. How could this be? Jin Se-ram thought. Because even if he was threatened, admitting his guilt was like adding fuel to the fire and setting himself on fire. Yu Sung's expression at the press conference seemed strange to Se-ram. It felt like he had to admit his guilt. There was probably something else behind all this. The next fact discovered online left Jin Se-ram very puzzled. In the personal file of Yu Sung, a long-distance fighter, tank, there was no family, his parents were deceased, his wife and children were not mentioned. Jin Se-ram tried to understand how Cha Ryung, maybe he wasn't her biological son, but then that would also be indicated in the documents. Besides, Cha Ryung looked very much like his father. The girl continued to try to guess what Yu Sung's admission of these accusations meant, whether it was related to Cha Ryung. Cha Ryung stood before the most powerful of the horned horrors, purple flames enveloping his entire figure. His eyes and hair also shone with this new energy. Cha Ryung couldn't understand what was happening to his body. The horned horror headed towards him. The monster's energy was scarlet and seemed to be threads around it. He quickly flew towards Cha Ryung. One thing the boy knew for sure, with this new energy his body could continue to move. He was able to respond to the monster's attacks with his own blow, and that was enough. Rex's grinning face was very close. Cha Ryung looked him straight in the eyes. The technique he was able to use was called Destructive Rain. These techniques could cause damage even to his powerful opponent. It was a clash of scarlet and violet power. Cha Ryung saw what his opponent was going to do. The horned horror moved a great distance away and directed a stream of power towards the man. Cha Ryung managed to dodge the blow. The horned horror flew towards Charyun. He was engulfed in a scarlet furious flame. Charyun was still able to block his attacks. The new energy helped him act more confidently and quickly. Charyun used a technique called swell. He could throw his opponent quite far. Charyun understood that he had not yet completely destroyed the monster, but he managed to land 2 very strong blows. After them, Rex clearly became weaker. Now Charyun needed to stab him in the chin with the needle. In this state, Charyun will be able to do it. At that moment, the strange power that had enveloped him in radiance disappeared. Charyun didn't understand at all what happened. The monster had already recovered from the last blows and was ready to continue the fight. Charyun's strength had completely left him. The horned horror was approaching inexorably. His gaze shone scarlet. The same truck he had gotten out of flew over his head. The truck fell heavily to the ground, and Charyun thought that having positions among the hunters was necessary in order to assign roles that suited each individual. It was Seok Cheol-gang who intervened in the battle using his powers. Someone like Cheol-gang could easily lift a truck. Now the monster turned to him to fight this enemy. The horned horror attacked Seok Cheol-gang. Even if the hunter is badly wounded, he is still able to stand firm. The horned horror struck Cheol-gang blow after blow, and he blocked them. This was Tank's role and duty. Sacrifice helped in battles. It was also possible to gather all your strength and deal a powerful blow to the enemy. Charyun could do it. He concentrated all his remaining strength into this blow. Charyun used the needle. This was already the task of a close-range fighter. The fight was finally over. Horned terror. Rex lay on the sidewalk tiles like all the others. As Charyun and Cheol-gang helped each other stay on their feet, they heard a voice saying that the vehicle carrying the captive monster had been hijacked. The voice said that as a result of this incident, there were dozens of casualties among ordinary citizens. Soldiers called to fight the monsters appeared on the street. Charyun noticed that they arrived just in time. Less than an hour later, this shocking news spread everywhere. Im Jae-hwan also saw a video online about 2 guys, 2 heroes, who had a major impact on the world. What nonsense, the broker asked out loud. Charyun recalled his childhood and the house where he lived with his father. When he got hurt, his father treated his bruises and abrasions, but the boy asked not to do this. Let it heal on its own somehow. Yu-sung insisted that even the smallest wound needed to be treated. He explained to his son that if he left her like that now, it could hurt even more later. Charyun asked if Yu-sung himself was in pain, because when he fights monsters, he gets wounds that sometimes bleed a lot. Yu-sung replied that he was also afraid of this. When he got injured, it hurt. And if there was heavy bleeding, it was scary. Yu-sung said that he was just enduring it because if he didn't fight anymore, other people might get hurt. As a child, Charyun had one thought constantly running through his head. He wanted to become like his father when he grew up. But on the other hand, even then he understood one thing. Without knowing the exact reason, he felt that his father did not want such a future for him. Yu-sung told his son no every time, as if he felt guilty for these words. Perhaps that is why he forbade it. Charyun believed that when he grew up, his father would tell him everything. He hoped that Yu-sung would explain why he was so reluctant for his son to become a hunter. But now, all this was impossible. Opening his eyes, Charyun saw a bright ceiling above him. He lay in a hospital bed and thought that this situation was already very familiar to him. All this had happened to him a few days ago. Maybe he was aiming at me, asked the man sitting next to him. Charyun quickly turned his head. Zik Escherm was sitting next to his bed, and he said that last time Charyun was to blame himself. Charyun asked the elf what he was doing here. The guy sat up in bed and was pierced by a sharp pain. Zik Escherm said that it was better for him not to make any sudden movements for now. Escherm said that the treatment was successful, but after such injuries, recovery is usually difficult, and Charyun will be able to move his arm in about a month. Zik told Charyun to only think about resting. He believed that Charyun still had a lot of things to do. The guy said that, of course, he was grateful for the help, but he still had one question for Escherm. Escherm assumed that Charyun wanted to know if he knew his father, and he confirmed this by stating that they worked together. Charyun tried to sit up again. Zik Escherm looked at him carefully. Charyun took an apple from the basket and thanked the visitor for it. He asked why Escherm was looking at him so intently. Did he really think that Charyun was going to hit him? Zik admitted that, to be honest, it wasn't the reaction he expected. It surprised him. Charyun stated that he didn't know what was expected of him. He was just going to ask if Escherm knew his father. He said that Zik was completely different today than he was last time, so he could conclude that Escherm didn't just know Yu-sung. Okay, Charyun said. Get out, Charyun said, or I'll cut off your hand with that knife you're holding. Zik recoiled, and Charyong asked if this was the reaction they expected from him. The guy said that he chose the most appropriate expressions. If Asura was offended by it, then he was ready to apologize. Asura admitted that Charyong almost guessed, although he expected a more emotional reaction. Charyong said that in order to get a more emotional reaction, he should have come to him 2 years earlier. Then he would have received what he expected in full. Charyong explained that at the time, his head was full of thoughts about the people who did this to his father. When Charyong was training, he also thought about those who saw everything but did nothing. One day, he wanted to make them answer for everything. Zeke Esserm asked if he thought differently now. Charyong replied that he couldn't say that he had different thoughts now. It was just that his priorities had changed, no matter how you look at it. And that was too much for him. The guy admitted that he wasn't even on Zeke's level yet. And what could he do to make them answer for everything? Now, Charyong's most important goals were to pay for his father's treatment and continue living until a cure was invented. He didn't know when he would be able to achieve them, but he was ready to do whatever he could. Charyong said that even if someone tries to stop him, he will definitely find a way to stop them. Zik Eshem replied that he had no intention of disturbing Charyong. He only came here to ask a few questions. Eshem wanted to know why, although Charyong was a biological son, he was not registered in the documents. Zik asked after the mental breakdown began, who looked after Charyong? Charyong replied that his father raised him alone and told Z not to think that he was the only one who pestered him with such questions. The boy insisted that he grew up alone. Zik Esserm asked if the other person had heard of Duganaki. Charyong asked what country this person was from, since he didn't know that. Zeke explained that this was not a human name, but the official title of the Dragon of Destruction. He was the source of the poison that poisoned Yu Sung, and this news shocked Charyong. Zeke said that this is the most dangerous creature that still lives and rages in this world. Just a few decades ago, all of humanity was gripped by fear of dragons. From the moment of their first appearance and for many years, people together with other races built a wall to protect themselves from these monsters. Thanks to the merits of the hunters, the dungeon and monsters no longer threatened the safety of people. The only exceptions were certain creatures. There were creatures that were capable of destroying the erected wall. They were so strong. These creatures were dragons. Monsters stronger, smarter, and more cunning than any race in this world. Although ancient races hostile to humans were rarely encountered. Among the strong monsters, the danger level of the dragons was at the highest limit. They were not simply disgusted by humans, but saw humanity as an object to be dominated and exploited by the dragons. But they made the mistake of underestimating the powers and capabilities of the hunters. Zeke Esserm said that the dragons believed that they did not need to destroy humans. Humanity would not cope with the dungeons and would die out on its own. The dragons planned to wait until states and societies collapsed in order to breed people like cattle and play the role of deities for them in exchange for safety. Charyong said that we should be grateful to the dragons for the feudal plans, and Esserm said that the hunters stood firm and learned to clear the dungeons. He said that when the plan failed, the dragons decided to intervene personally and subjugate this world, intimidating people with their unprecedented power. And at that moment, Yu Sung appeared. He was the hunter who proved that dragons could be defeated with the right strategy and the strength to implement it. Thanks to him, dragon hunting was successful all over the world, and from that time on, changes began. Charyong assured that he knew this himself, and then the dragons hid deep in the dungeons. No, Zeke Esserm said, they just changed tactics. The elf explained that they were very cunning and could take the form of a representative of any race. The dragons realized that they could not defeat people with just one layer, so they began to change their appearance and dissolve into society. It was all a secret, but Zik wanted to tell Yusun's son, because besides, this guy was going to become a hunter. Duganaki, Zeke said, was the dragon leader that Yu Seong had been chasing before he fell ill. It was necessary to catch him, and then it would be possible to make a medicine that could cure Charyong's father. Zeke Esserm said that if Charyong is willing to do this, he must become stronger and rise to the very top as a hunter. Zeke said he would give him a chance to punish Duganaki. Charyong held a business card in his hand. There was a sign drawn on the business card. Zeke said that if Charyong didn't believe him or couldn't make up his mind, then he could continue to live as if he hadn't heard anything or had forgotten everything. Ha, Charyong said. He won't be able to decide. If this is true, even if participation threatens him with death, he will never back down. Zik said that it would be up to Charyong himself to decide, as he had said right away. But in order to gain this right, Charyong will need to increase his level. Dragons are extremely dangerous and hide quite deep. They have many faces, which they carefully hide, waiting for their moment. Zeke said that even if they got the evidence and made it public, there would be no point in it until they personally destroyed the enemy. Once exposed, they will only hide somewhere again. Only horror and mistrust will remain among people. Therefore, it was necessary to cut out the enemy secretly, quickly, and sharply. They must not be given any chance to escape or resist. They must be destroyed with one blow to a vulnerable spot. In order to catch Duganahi, Zeke began preparing a special team several years ago. All his men were very reliable hunters, capable of destroying the dragon. If Charyung's skills weren't enough to fight alongside them, no matter how much he wanted to, there would be no place for him on the team. Not a single member of the team could be excluded from the plan to catch the dragon, because that would not only mean the plan would fail, it would also put the entire team in danger. Charyung asked how much time he had, since the whole team couldn't wait for him alone. Zeke Esserm said that while they haven't been able to pinpoint his identity yet, it's estimated that Charyung will have about 2 more years, but the sooner the better. As Charyung himself could already understand, no one would take his circumstances into account if everything was ready. Zeke Esserm didn't care what the boy thought about all this. If Charyung didn't trust him, they might never meet again. But Esserm could promise one thing. Regardless of whether Charyung joins his team or not, Zeke Esserm will definitely destroy Duganahi. With these words, the elf left the hospital room. Charyung was left alone to tidy himself up and think about everything. So there was a way to cure his father. Charyung began to doubt. He was shocked by such sudden and surprising news. No, he told himself. Perhaps it was anxiety or fear that he would not be able to take part in the revenge. Although this was not yet a final answer, Charyung told himself that he would definitely be on this team no matter what happened. He felt joy. He finally had a chance, an opportunity that had not been seen before, and he was going to grab it. It was quite possible that for the first time in his life he felt such a strong desire that it filled his heart to the brim. Charyung heard someone else enter the room. The girl who stood at the threshold was glad that Charyung had already woken up. She asked if there was any pain in the arm or other places. The guy replied that the muscles were a little sore. The girl said that the attending physician would tell her the details. At first, there would be some slight discomfort in the muscles. She added that Charyung's hand was literally put back together. When the ambulance arrived, the boy's arm was in terrible condition. A little more and it would have had to be amputated. But during the operation, a high-ranking healer joined the doctors, and he reassembled Charyung's arm. "Can I ask you something?" Charyung said, taken aback. He wanted to know about the guy who was brought with him. The girl replied that the second patient, as far as she knew, was discharged on the same day, and he had quite high recovery rates. She said that it was on the same day that Charyung wanted to know how long he himself had been in that hospital. The girl looked at Charyung and asked to take a photo with him. Charyung was surprised, but agreed to pose for the photo. The girl was about to leave, very pleased. Charyung asked her if he could check out already. Yes, she replied, but advised Charyung not to go out through the main entrance. The hospital was now full of reporters. They all wanted to interview Charyung. The guy was surprised why reporters wanted to interview him. The girl said that he probably didn't know anything. She showed him the screen of her phone and asked if he saw himself there. "It was a terrible accident that must never happen again," the caption read. And the video showed the same fight with the horned horrors. Chats and comments exploded with the number of emotional reactions and comments. People wrote that if it weren't for these two heroes, there would have been at least several hundred victims. Charyung said that all these people were just crazy, and his interlocutor laughed and said that they really were crazy, burning with curiosity about who he was and where he came from. She gave him the bag, saying that his friend had given it to him. This can come in handy if Charyung doesn't want to be seen. He can use this and exit from the back of the building. Charyung thought about Jin Se-ram. What could she have given him? Maybe it was equipment with invisibility magic, after all. The rich had their own ways. The bag contained a climbing rope, cheap and strong. Charyung glanced sadly at the window. The rope had to be lowered from it. There were thick bushes under the window. Charyung came down even though his body still hurt. The girl from the hospital told him to be worried about the photo he took. She just asked for permission to post a photo on Instagram when Charyung becomes a famous hunter. Charyung waved goodbye to her. A familiar car was waiting for him near the sidewalk. Jin Se-ram sat in the back seat and looked at her phone. Charyung joined her and asked if she really had nothing but the rope. Se-ram asked if it was necessary to leave everything as it was so that Charyung's identity would be revealed. The guy said of course not. He noticed a large bag on the seat and asked what was in it. Jin Se-ram replied that she bought him clothes and shoes, and she also bought him a smartphone because she suspected that his own had broken. "Don't you dare cry, you hear?" he said, looking at how Charyung hugged the bag to herself. By the way, I can't believe it, the girl said. She didn't know where to start and what to ask first. Jin Sai-ram was surprised that this happened right where Charyung was. She never thought that that monster could be in such a place. Charyung wondered if she meant the horned horror when she called him a monster. He said out loud that life is a chain of events, and then asked where they were going. Charyung said that he wanted to rest. Jin Se-ram understood this desire, but she couldn't do anything. They only had time today. Jin Sai-ram explained that in order to make the clothes on time, they needed to take measurements today. Charyung said that there were clothes in the bag. The girl replied that it was not these clothes that were needed, but the hunter's costume. She stated that Charyung could consider himself lucky that the best high-end atelier in the world had decided to make armor for him. There are 3 types of suits in total, depending on the qualities of the hunter. The first type is fabric, that is, sewn from material. The physical protective capacity of tissues is at its lowest level. But with the help of various techniques, the fabric is easiest to endow with magical protective properties, which is why such suits are most often used by healers and magicians. The second type was metallic. Such suits were strong, nothing to say. But the problem was their heaviness. It is difficult to handle durable and high-quality metal unless you have outstanding physical abilities and health. And somewhere in the middle is leather, not too heavy and strong enough. For a long-range fighter, this was just right. That's right, Charyong agreed. He himself had the opportunity to see that fighting with bare hands was very unpleasant. Charyong was excitedly starting up his new phone, and Jin Sai-ram asked him how he managed to destroy it. She wanted to know about the horned horror. She didn't understand how the 2 boys managed to capture it. Charyong replied that someone had filmed it, so she could see it herself. Jin Se-ram said that the video was only filmed up to the middle. All that was shown was how the 1-horned and 2-horned monsters were destroyed. There was no scene of fighting with a 5-star, Jin Se-ram said. Charyong asked in surprise if she really meant the 5-star level. He himself understood that that monster was simply unusually strong. Even if Charyong and Cheolgang were fully prepared to fight him, they still wouldn't be able to defeat him. I would also like to know where that power came from. Jin Se-ram asked why her companion was silent. She wanted him to tell her how they managed to deal with the monster. Charyong replied that he didn't know. It just happened that way. He had no other explanation. Jin Se-ram didn't understand how this was possible. Such a dangerous monster could only be destroyed by professional hunters who were fully trained and as part of a whole squad. At the same time, it didn't look like Charyong was lying at all. It turned out that they really did it together. Jin Se-ram demonstratively turned away to the window. She was surrounded by very annoying geniuses. She told the guy to be careful. Now they won't let him live a peaceful life. Charyong replied that he had already seen the reporters. Jin Se-ram wasn't just referring to the journalists. It seemed like Charyong didn't quite understand what kind of situation she and that guy had gotten themselves into. And, by the way, the second one has already been fully revealed. Over the last 3 days, he has already been offered more than 1 interview and even more than 1 participation in the program. After all, his hair color immediately catches the eye. Jin Se-ram added that this guy didn't say a word about Charyong. He was asked to at least name his name, but he replied that he could not say it without his friend's consent. Charyong remembered making 1 request to Cheolgang that day. He said then that everything that happened and everything that he did, if anyone asks Cheolgang about it, he should say that he doesn't know anything. Charyong didn't want others to know his name and face. Cheolgang assured that it was okay. He would definitely say so. Jin Se-ram asked if he and that guy had become friends, but Charyong didn't even know what to answer. He received messages from the boss who wanted Charyong to text him when he woke up, while he promised to look after Yu Sung in the hospital. Jin Se-ram said that nothing could happen before the hero school exams. Charyong asked if there was any reason why it was important before the exam. He texted Im Jae-hwan that he had eaten and asked to meet in the evening because he needed to talk. Jin Se-ram replied that she had learned a little about the exam, and that it was much more difficult than she had originally thought. If you look at the level of competition over the past 5 years, the odds are 100 to 1, and that's only for those who have been accepted. Charyong suggested that it's common to scare people with false numbers when applying. Charyong said that in any case they were all weaker than him. Because Se-ram was somehow taken, these words made the girl furious. Charyong explained that he didn't mean that she had no abilities at all, but the girl told him to stop and not say anything else. They got out of the car, and Jin Se-ram admitted that the guy didn't tell her anything new. In terms of abilities, he really was the best. There was no arguing with that. But the girl suggested looking at it differently. Did he really think that those who lacked abilities would pass such a difficult exam using only their own strength? Charyung replied that he thought he could do it on his own, but then he realized what the girl meant. They approached the elevator door and Charyung asked if Seiram meant that applicants could form groups for the exam. She confirmed this. Over the past few years, the majority of those who entered the school were from hunter families, with either one or both parents being hunters. Naturally, their parents know each other, so they agree in advance on which team their offspring will be on. Jin Se-ram explained that members of such groups make up 100% of those admitted over the past 5 years. The girl said that if Charyung tried to tell everyone that he was the guy from the news, he would immediately become a target and the main competitor. In general, this is not provided for in the School of Heroes, but it would be better to enter on special grounds for merits in destroying monsters, Se-ram said. But Charyung said that he did not need this. He assumed that if the majority, and not all, acted in this way, then there was someone among them who did it himself, and for Charyung, that was enough. He was determined to make it through and get in. Jin Se-ram looked at her friend and thought that determination was, of course, good. But something seemed to have changed in him. Charyung asked if there was a toilet here. He wanted to change his clothes. Jin Se-ram said that she would go to the fitting first, and after Charyung changed, she could come too. She headed towards the studio sign. She told the girl at the reception that she had an appointment with the president, and she was immediately recognized and called by name. She was asked to wait a little. The girl called the president of the company, but what she was told on the phone was unexpected for her. She said she would pass it on. The girl apologized to Jin Se-ram and said that the president had urgent business today. Jin Se-ram asked what kind of nonsense that was. She heard that all the other times were already taken before. The secretary said that Mr. President would pay compensation. Jin Se-ram replied that the problem was not about compensation. In 2 months, it will be necessary to take exams at the School of Heroes. At such a time, it is impossible to cancel the meeting or even reschedule it. What? A voice suddenly rang out. Somewhere I already had an idea of this face. Jin Se-ram turned around abruptly and the voice tried to remember the name but failed. Lately, hunters often say that the youth has become completely different now. Although not exactly now, but the hunters who came later were always in better conditions than their predecessors. They had the tactics of attacking monsters that the first wave hunters had developed by risking their lives, as well as more advanced equipment and technology. However, when criticizing the youth, they meant all those who are born in good conditions. The surviving pioneer hunters started families and gave everything they had to their children. It wasn't just about abilities. The discussion also concerned the upbringing that the hunters' children received from their earliest years.